estimated the traffic coming in at 9 a.m. I'm not used to coming to Columbia like that. Would ask that Commissioner Unum please enter the notice of meeting statements.
A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the January 23rd, 2020 Commission meeting was distributed January 21st, 2020 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistants, and other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next item is to approve the agenda. There is a proposed agenda. There is one item that I would like to add under number 11C, and that would be discussion of public input, that being as part of commissioner's business. Are there any other proposed amendments or additions to the agenda as proposed?
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I just have a few just general kind of questions I can answer. Is there a place on the agenda here where commissioners can just kind of, under a new business, I guess, or just general topics for just clarification issues? Half or Mary or just whoever wants to.
Yeah, so depending on sort of what you're looking for, that could come under commissioner update if there was a request for information, or under new business if there was a request, we could amend it if there was a specific topic that's not present.
I think it's just kind of general discussion of just stuff. I want to get clear.
Okay.
No, and it's not anything too difficult. I mean, it's just basic questions I've got.
Okay. Let's.
Like what time?
Yeah.
Do most commissioners leave to come to a 9 o'clock meeting? Stuff like that.
Apparently not early enough when the traffic in both my home county and this county is tied up.
I got to be 5:30 to leave by 6.
Usually
miss the traffic.
Usually when I get on the road by 8:20, by 7:20, I'm down here by 9.
26 was way back there. Even leaving Greenville at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So let's. I think that's probably appropriate under the update section for right now.
I'll jump
if it's just adjourned, and we'll go from there.
Commissioner's update, probably, right?
Yes, sir. That's where I believe it would be appropriate.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions with regards to the agenda as proposed, or amendments or additions? Hearing none, would entertain then a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Do you have a second? Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. The next item on the now approved agenda is for us to go into executive session, and I would entertain a motion for us to enter into executive session for purposes of discussing a contractual matter regarding Lutheran Services Carolinas. Do I have that motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we will then move into executive session. Are we going to
move next door?
Yeah, we will be moving next door in order to accomplish that. So it's not to disrupt.
Two doors.
To take everything with us, right?
No, you'll be fine. You won't need anything.
The record to reflect that the commission rose from executive session at 9:45, that during executive session, no votes were taken, no motions were made, and that we are resuming our public session at 10:55, or 9:55, excuse me, to go back onto the agenda as part of public session. Following executive session, prior to going on to any other elements on the agenda, are there any motions to be made with regard to the matters that were discussed in executive session?
Chairman, unless somebody else, I would ask that the director read a motion that I think has been prepared so we get it exactly right. And that be my motion, or anybody else that wants to be the primary, but I move that she be allowed, or ask that she be allowed to read the motion.
Without any objection? All right.
The motion is to continue working with Lutheran Services Carolina to come into compliance, but that admissions be suspended until such time that Lutheran Services Carolina has met all the benchmarks set out for them in a letter sent on December 6, 2019. Suspension should be lifted, and SCDDSN will continue to provide close monitorship to ensure continued compliance.
That's my motion. Unless someone else wants to make it, that's my motion.
Okay. You have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion with regard to this? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. The next item on the agenda is our invocation. I would recognize Commissioner Blackwood for that.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, our decisions so we can do your work. Due season, we shall reap if we do not lose heart on our commitment to serve the clients of DDSN and the families of South Carolina. Guide us in this meeting and throughout 2020 so that the results can be seen days, months, and even years after today. We come expecting to make a mark on this earth that is significant, but we can only do it through your guidance and strength. In your name we pray.
Next item on the agenda is the introduction of guests. And Michelle, since you are in the back right, I'm going to start with you, and if we can work that way and forward from there. Thank you.
Michelle Schaefer, Maxville, North County. Order, Director of Chester, Lancaster County. Director of Organization.
Jason Tapman, Director for Lawrence County DSM Board. Mike Moss, Calhoun County Disability and Special Needs Board.
Yeah, let's go back. You're a little bit early, and we'll go back that way.
Wilson, Director of Accounting and Contracts, DSM.
Bob Johnson, Pryor Center, Newberry Disability and Special Needs Board.
Kevin Wright, State Director, South Carolina Mentor.
Darren, Engineering Director here at DDSN.
Morning, everybody. I'm Samantha Baker with PNA.
Kelly Baker from Family Connection.
What do you do with community options?
Lindsay Daniel, Community Options.
Ryan Wade, Director of Planning and Development, DSM.
Reverend Heather McPherson, Richland County.
Okay, I'll be take two. I'm Ann Dalton with DDSN. I'm setting a row up, so I was confused.
I'm Barbara Oswald, Vice President of Videos and Special Olympics, South Carolina. Heather Waddell, Tri Development Center, Macon County.
Rufus Britt, DDSN.
Margaret Alewine, Department of Health and Human Services. Patty Eric, Information Technology, DDSN.
I'm Lori Manus. I'm the Director of Case Management at DDSN.
Melissa Ritter, DSN.
Susan Beck, DDSN.
Terry Rogers, Jessica Services.
George Kimmer with DDSN.
Chris Clark, DSM.
Thomas Holloway, DSM.
Brian Malley, DDSN.
Robert Murray, DDSN.
All right, I think that's it for guests here. There's one thing that I want to acknowledge right now. There's one face out there that we're very, very used to seeing at these meetings. That being Ralph Courtney from Tri Development. Ralph's having some fairly severe health issues. Ralph's been, for me as a commissioner, a huge asset, a great source of information. I just would ask that everybody just have him in your thoughts. And I hope to see him back here at one of these meetings real soon. I'm not used to looking out there and not seeing his face. So I just wanted to bring that as a personal statement to everybody. Okay, so next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from July 18th, 2019, which is the last time that we actually had a quorum, which is the reason why we're going back that far to approve those minutes. Everyone was given a copy of the minutes previously on the commission. Does anybody have any amendments, changes, or corrections to those proposed minutes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion with regard to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from July 18th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from that meeting are approved. And going back and look at that, Commissioner Blackwood brought my attention to this. There are a few things pending in that particular under policy committee that we're going to need to go back and address and probably put that under old business under the next commission meeting, because we have to follow. The next item on the agenda is public input center, just the one? Anybody?
Yes.
Okay. So as part of public input, I would recognize Jason Tavener.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commission members, Director Poole, thank you for this opportunity. I'm Jason Tavener, I'm the Executive Director for the Lawrence County Disability Special Needs Board, but today I'm here as the Chair of the South Carolina Human Service Providers. Just wanted to welcome the new members to the Commission, and for all members, thank you for your service. We appreciate what you're doing here. Thank you very much for that. Also wanted to share about the Human Service Providers, just to make sure you're aware. We represent 48 providers in the state. That's approximately 32,000 people supported, around 9,000 employees, and budget estimates of around $440 billion that we are spending out there in the community. The mission of our organization is to provide a network of professional support for its member organizations, which focuses on the delivery of quality supports for people with lifelong disabilities in the areas of advocacy, resource allocation, technical support, and training and education. Along those training and education parts, I'd like to make you aware of our conference. We have an annual conference. This year it is March 9th through 11th at the Embassy Suites in Myrtle Beach. At our conferences are around 400 people, includes board members, employees. We will have this year national, regional, state speakers on various topics. The conference would not be possible without our generous support of our 35 vendors and sponsors. I'd also like to thank DSN as one of those. Thank you for helping us in that effort. I'd like to encourage the commission members, if you'd like to meet providers in that environment, again, invite you to the conference. It's a good opportunity to learn about different topics while, of course, engaging in some social activities. Last August, Human Service Providers developed a strategic plan. There were 4 major components from that: develop and retain active members, improve organizational effectiveness and capacity, expand marketing and training opportunities, and strengthen relationships with local, state, and federal policymakers. We've actively started that, I would say, in 2020. Along those lines, we've met with DDSN. We reached out to DDSN and Director Poole in an effort to collaborate with trainings to be provided across the state. We'd also like for our voice to be heard on these topics and others, but at least the Mercer rate study, case management rates, and the concern there is, if you look at the scheduling, potential access issues, the CMS final rule compliance, state budget priorities, provider perspective on regulations and policies, waiting list, and the proposed transfer of 65 state-owned legacy facilities to providers. Because these priorities affect people we support, their families, employees, these decisions that are being made, that you make, are important. They affect financial stability of providers across the state and our ability to continue to provide services to people with lifelong disabilities. I look forward to the opportunity to meet each of you, and I also encourage you, I said this last time I was up here, and I still encourage this, please take time to meet locally with the providers in your area, see the services at the grassroots effort. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jason. Having no additional requests for public input, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the commissioner update section. Commissioner Malcolm, we'll start with you and go across the board. So if you'd like to begin.
Thank you.
Updates.
Thank you. I just wanted to publicly say that I would like to thank the Lord first for the opportunity to serve on this board. I would secondly like to thank Governor Master and his staff for making this possible for me and for asking me to do this at this time in my life. The agency needs a lot of reform, and it has for a very long time. And with Ms. Poole, we are at least moving down that road slowly, and I'm thankful for that. And I intend to work as best I can with the rest of the board members, not only for this much needed reform that we need so desperately, but to allow the people that we serve to reach their potential, truly reach their potential in this life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say, well, first of all, welcome to my fellow new commissioners. We're delighted to have you guys on board. And Jason, you talk about meeting with your local service providers. I always feel a little guilty that my work tends to be around the country and around the world. And I haven't had as much time as I would like to meet with the local providers, but I'm going to make that a priority. During this past month, I did have the opportunity to travel a bit to see how people in other states and other countries are dealing with the needs and what solutions they're proposing for people with disabilities. I gave a keynote speech at the India Autism Conference in Kolkata, India. They're way behind us, but striving to kind of get to where the U.S. is on some of our services. And then I also led a conference in Scottsdale, Arizona last week of the Council of Autism Service Providers. And that's always just a great opportunity to see how other states are working with these populations and what solutions they're coming up with. So, but I'll work to see some more of our local services in the coming months.
I don't think I have any updates today, but I definitely just want to say welcome to our new commissioners, and it's nice to have a quorum again for the working. So thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the great hospitality with which the staff and Mary have been so kind in ordering me, and I'm so impressed with what I see. It is, I think, a great opportunity for service. To be a commissioner is a real honor, and I thank the rest of the members for being willing to serve. Lots of interest, lots of interesting information. It's kind of an immersion process, I suppose, that it might take years to really get it all, Mary, but I want to tell everybody that's interested how cooperative and helpful the staff has been. I love the website. I think y'all done a great job on the website, and I know that a lot of work had to go into that. That's a really important thing these days of social media and everything, to have a comprehensible way by which one can look and see how to apply for services. So many issues we face, and what I have seen from our director, and I think, how long have you been on board now? About a year and a half? 2 years?
Months or something?
It was, yeah, a little over a year.
But, well, year, I mean, she's very much immersed because of her background, Mr. Chairman. I think that makes her a great workhorse. Let's just put it that way. I mean, she is a Trojan worker too. She seems like she never stops. And anybody with that many kids, I mean, she never stops. I think it's 10. Is it that many? Yeah, you seem to hesitate on that. I have one quick question, and just kind of, and I don't really expect a full answer, but I'm having a little trouble comprehending the difference between a regulation that has become a bit controversial and issues such as what is the legal authority, Mr. Chairman, and I don't need an answer necessarily today, but I think this is something that commissions should be kind of thinking about as I go through from kind of just a legal background perspective, which is, well, that's my background. honestly. I'm
And you were
just,
a senator, so that's.
well, I was a senator for a little while, yeah, you see how I said that with remorse? I mean, yeah, that's
Hopefully
true.
it'll help.
Hopefully it might add a little. But I'll give you an example of what I need some help with. To what degree does a memorandum, for instance, from the staff, or I guess it would ultimately come from the office, but I did see memorandum, it seemed like from other directions, too. So you have directives and memorandums, and one would, I was just kind of scanning through things, just generally looking at stuff. For instance, there's a memorandum that I found real interesting, and not that I need a discussion on this, but it's in just a few sentences. So it's a pending waiver enrollment, came out October the 11th of 19, so just a few months old. But you can find it just boom, right online. My first question would be, are all the memorandums listed? And I'm presuming they are, so that I can see full list of memorandums. Question number 2. Does the commission get copies of the memorandums prior to? Do we approve memorandums prior to? Even if there's not, I mean, as by way of information. This memorandum in July 18 DDSN, so this, I guess, preceded Mrs. Poole, Director Poole. DDSN implemented a waiver enrollment timeline to assist case management providers in moving individuals from waiver slot allocation to waiver enrollment or declination, that's denial, within 6 months. 6 months. At this time, there are individuals that continue to pend waiver enrollment in excess of 6 months. So now this goes from associate director, so I don't think it, let's say to executive director, from associate director. Now, pending waiver. Now, next sentence. At the time, there are individuals that continue to pend waiver enrollment in excess of 6 months. DDSN recognizes that there are factors that hold up the enrollment process, including Medicaid eligibility and provider availability. However, we must continue to address these pending cases as they directly result in elongated wait list times for those in need. We need your assistance to bring resolution to slots which have been pending for greater than 6 months. As a result, you will be receiving a list of individuals pending ID/RD and community supports waiver enrollment in excess of 6 months. DDSN is requesting that case managers take immediate action to address these cases by utilizing the waiver enrollment timeline in current waiver policy. Please contact, and then Jennifer if additional information is over. So now, all right, that's, I mean, is that the waiting list? That's an example of what, you know, if things are flying around that have the force of what, a regulation or the force of a directive. I'd like to understand over time kind of how these things work. It seems to be very comprehensive. And this one, if I'm understanding it right, is pretty sweeping and pretty, I mean, what happens if you're on this list and into 6 months, you're off the list? Are they supposed to be told, these people that have been cut from the list, can they reapply? How does it work? So I don't need an answer. I'm just saying that my first kind of immersion into what's going on, interesting. What is a memorandum? What is a directive relative to regulation, force of law issues and all that? It could mean a lot by way of legal rights as well as individual rights who've been applying, think they're in good shape, and a year and a half later, well, we weren't able to find a provider for you. You've been cut a year ago. What? You know, so that doesn't make sense to me.
And that's not what that means.
Good. Okay. Good.
Just to give you,
okay,
lessen the heartburn.
Good.
That's not what that means.
Good.
But I'd be more than happy to work out any kind of issue you have with this. This is a long explanation.
And I don't need that.
Yeah,
we'll do that
but
later.
you will, yeah, you do need it, and that's part of your training. We've developed a training matrix for the commissioners, and on there are legal issues as far as even talking about executive session, what can be done, what cannot be done, all down to what your legal authority is. So that's part of the onboarding process.
And information to the relative to these kinds of things, information that comes to the commission. I want to make sure that even if it might be an overload, I think it's better that we get information than anything is left out. Otherwise, it would have the appearance that things would be hidden from the commission. That has been an accusation at one time, so we got to get past that.
And that's why it's on the website now. That memo is an operational memo to kind of spur case management to say, you've got people, in other words, they've been given a waiver slot. and they're not on the waiting list anymore, they've gotten the slot. Now it's a matter of getting them enrolled properly. So that memo was to spur case managers like, you need to go out and find them. And sometimes it is a matter of finding the people. And that's, there's a declination process when you can't find them. There's a declination process when you can't.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times people just can't make a decision as to, do they want to take this waiver slot or not? Do they want to give up the services they might have with another waiver in the state to this one? So there's a lot of implications, but that's an operational memo to spur case management to get onto these people. Because you're right, if you're on a waiting list forever, you've got a slot, now it's time to get in there and get your services. So that's what a memo like that would be for.
So to finish it up, Chairman, this is it. Is there some point in time, like for a memorandum like this, or other memorandums, there are a slew of them, that goes before the commission at some point, even by way of information, commission, boom, boom, here are memorandums that are coming through for operations, so that we see what it is, or do we have to find them online to ask questions?
We usually send them out to everybody. So that would include, when we send a memo out,
I don't get
not a memo like that.
We don't typically get operational memos.
If we were going to
if
stop
there's-
somebody's services, that would be something we bring towards the commission and say, we decided that after 6 months, they're going off the waiting list. That would be something that came to you. That would be a commission decision. This is just an operational, let's get the gears back moving. Don't forget about these people.
So this list is not the waiting list, it is a pending waiver enrollment.
Yes.
Right.
All right, which differs from the waiting list.
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask no further questions. I would like to see memorandums, though. That's, now, it might be, well, okay, here's a bucket of memorandums that are going out this week, and maybe I don't go through them, but I would just like to have the ability to scan, if I could. That's it, Chairman. That's all I got for issues.
Anything else as a result of any of the other updates? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is Commissioner's business. First item under that is the election of commission officer. One of the slots that was replaced, that a resignation took place, was for the vice chair. Typically, just for our new folks, the way it is operated is when we have, in the summer months, we have a nominating committee for the 3 officer slots, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. We've had a resignation in the middle of the year. What has typically happened is we've had nominations from the chair with regard to filling unoccupied spots, or from the vice chair if it was the chairman that resigned, and then have some discussion and a vote. I have discussed with Commissioner Blackwood her assuming the position of vice chairman, and then would therefore make a motion that on an interim basis until the next
Campaign speech.
that Commissioner Blackwood be appointed as the vice chairman for the commission until such time as a regular election is held.
Which is usually July.
Yeah, July.
Is there an increase in pay on that?
Yes.
You get the exact.
Double pay? Double our pay?
There you go.
Right, it's an exponential increase.
I nominate myself then too. Mr. Chairman, I would move ditto and add her to be vice chairman unless somebody else wants a job.
All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
No. Thank you.
See, hearing none, then Commissioner Blackwood is now serving as vice chairman with the thanks of the chair. The next item on the agenda is under that is the naming of committee members. I have had some feedback from everyone. Currently, Commissioner Unum is serving as the chair of the legislative subcommittee. Vice Chairman Blackwood is serving as the chair of the finance subcommittee. With regard to other appointments, at this time, I was going to request if Commissioner Malfris would consider chairing the policy committee.
Yes.
And would also ask that Commissioner Thomas have a seat on that particular committee. With regard to the filling the other slots, I would also ask Commissioner Thomas if he would serve on the legislative committee, and Commissioner Malfris if he would serve on the finance committee, and then appointing myself then would also be on policy and finance, and then Commissioner Blackwood, that will be the last slot for you as under legislative. That's a rough apportionment of the duties with regard to the 3 subcommittees. We are hopeful that we will have 2 more members joining us very shortly, and once that happens, we'll be able to spread things out just a little bit more as well. But that is, for the time being, the appointments with regard to the subcommittees.
That's reappointed in July or June as well.
Actually, that is my understanding is essentially the subcommittee appointments are done by the chair. So they could be reapportioned basically on how the committee, like the commission changes. So if we add people on, I can reappoint people, remove people. I don't think it's been part of a formal election.
Okay.
It's always just been appointments by the chair that I've done it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
In my time.
Sorry.
So that's what I was doing. The last item under the commissioner business that we added as part of the amended agenda was a discussion with regard to public input. And this is something that actually came up at the last meeting in July. So public input was set up about 10 years ago by the commission that was then serving as an opportunity to allow individuals to come forward, such as Mr. Tavener did today, and address the commission. At the time that it was established, as reflected in the minutes at that point in time, the intent of that was to allow individuals to come forward, but it was not to allow attorneys who had pending cases against DDSN to come forward and make statements. That basically they were excluded from access to the public input. When I joined the commission, that was the policy that was being followed by the chair with regard to the regulation of public input. The last chairperson changed that and began allowing public input from attorneys who have cases against us. When I assumed the chair, I went back to that, and there was a controversy about that. And as I said, I was going back to what was being done when I joined the commission. At that time, when we made that change, there was an individual who I did not allow to have public input because of that rule. And I said that we would discuss it at a future commission meeting. I'm bringing that back up. I don't know whether it's ripe with our new commissioners. They may want more information for any sort of decision, but it is something that I would like input on from the rest of the commission, maybe resulting in a motion at some point in time to sort of formalize that particular rule or amend it from what's existing in the minutes from back when it was established. I've had feedback from individuals who said there have been occasions in the past, even before I was on the commission, where attorneys have been allowed to address that. But I think as a general rule, up until the last chair, it wasn't being done. So there are reasons why you don't have people have active lawsuits against DDSN come forward and use our forum to vent their particular position. There are reasons why you may want to have.
Well, they don't come to speak on the litigation, right? Well, that's a violation. That'd be a violation of that's an
Directly or
ethics thing. You can't talk to the
directly or indirectly.
Indirectly, they do.
They do. Directly, probably not. But indirectly, they are oftentimes using it as a public forum to put out their version of a set of facts that are in dispute as part of a lawsuit.
And I have to say that sometimes I feel like I wouldn't know what was pending against the department, and I wouldn't know what the arguments are, but for what I hear in the public input session. So, I haven't thoroughly studied the issue. You and I had a little bit of conversation about it last time it was brought up. I have not thoroughly studied it and thought about the pros and cons, but I'm generally in favor of freer access to speak and present information. I come from an appellate legal background where both sides argue the case in front of the body that's going to decide, and there's opportunity for back and forth, so I kind of prefer that.
It's my opinion that as a chairman of the board, you should be able to decide who speaks to us and who doesn't. I mean, if that's an attorney, if it's anybody else, they're not obligated. We're not obligated to allow anybody to speak, as they, just like they don't do in the state, but for many of the other commissions, you can't speak. So I think we give them that as a courtesy. We should continue to do that as much as we can. But if you have any reason to believe somebody should not waste our time, then they shouldn't speak. That's simple.
at the pleasure of the chair. How about at the pleasure of the chair?
but
Well, and that's how it's been, and that's not without controversy either. And that's why I wanted that input. And I will say that one of the things that I requested was to try to find out how other commissions handle public input. And the reality is it doesn't appear like any of the other commissions has a formal public input process.
I was watching in July whenever you talked about it.
They just don't. You don't have that with the other commissions. There's no opportunity for people in the public to get up and talk. Now, we're a unique commission, I think, in terms of our subject matter, but.
We're not required to do that either.
What it means is there's no real guidance out there. There's no sort of legal.
Well, there's nothing that stops the lawyers from talking to us individually, I don't presume, but I guess it would be on a little bit thin ice, Mr. Chairman, if I mean, the rule is the lawyer cannot engage the client. Now, if we are considered the client, but we've been sued, let's say as a commission or individual or something like that, that would preclude, I would think a good lawyer, if they wanted to tell us something going on prior to filing the lawsuit, would get in touch with the various members and say, look, I'm going to have to file another lawsuit against you, or I'm going to have to bring a case against you, or something, based on if y'all don't straighten up or something, so, or just to let you know, FYI. But to come here, to be able to come here and talk to the issue, I almost think that's a breach.
Sometimes we're named, sometimes we're not, right? On certain lawsuits.
Right.
Individual commissioners sometimes are named.
Right. Usually as chair, the chair is always named.
It's an interesting ethics question. We should submit it to the bar for review.
And again, I think the people that are coming forward to speak would say that they're not talking with regard to the lawsuit, that they are trying to talk as an advocate in that situation. They're not, but there's a lot of crossover. I mean,
Right, there's a lot of crossover.
So, well, I don't know necessarily that I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion at this point in time. I was just wanting to get feedback because at this point in time, it has been sort of at the discretion of the chair, and I don't like operating back.
I'm not sure why we wouldn't. I'm not sure. I mean, there's nobody more in favor of the Freedom of Information Act than I am. I'll get into that another day, another time. But aside from that, I could clearly make a motion right now that that at the discretion of the chair, we decide who speaks and who does not speak. And if the chair wants to ask the rest of us, then we'll discuss that at another time. But
I think that is the status quo though, right? I don't think that would require a motion.
Well, actually, I think it would, because I think it would certainly clarify things for me. So I wouldn't mind having.
I think it should be a motion, and I think I would ask for a second.
Okay, we'll treat that.
I'll second you.
Okay, we have a second from Mr. Blackwood. Any further discussion with regard to that?
I'm willing to support that motion because I think that allows flexibility. Ask you to take into consideration my point of view that
Absolutely.
I'd rather hear the information.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I really, I don't claim to have any sort of genius about that. It's just I was sort of falling back on what condition was. Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion with regard to that?
Can we have the motion repeated? Let's make sure I'm clear.
The motion is that it would be at the discretion of the chair as to who would speak to our commission in public comment. And that he could reject any person at any time he would like to, including in the middle of their speech.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you for that guidance. I trust me that I will be very careful about exercising that, and appreciate additional input from you guys. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, that is the legislative committee update regarding the state regulations. Recognize Commissioner.
Thank you. So the legislative committee, I believe I reported at our December meeting that we've met one time, that was back in November 5th, I believe it was, to review the proposed regulations. We made some changes to the proposal that was given to us and voted at that time to send the regulations to the state register for posting, which was our understanding of what the process should be. Now that we have a quorum, the legislative committee is bringing those proposed regulations to the full commission, again, with a recommendation that the proposed regulations be put through the legislative process again. A little bit of a redo here. That would be to send a notice of drafting, to republish the proposed regulations, open the public comment period back up, a 30-day public comment period, and then hold a public hearing.
to clarify, this is not approving them. It is simply approving that the process is going forward to get them submitted to the legislature. This is a draft version, basically, to be submitted to the legislature after we go through the public comment.
And it's true that we'll have a new legislative committee to review these before anything else is done. Correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it has to go through public comment. We'll have a public meeting, and then any sort of adjustments we can have can be done as part of the legislative committee, and we have to have another vote before we.
Well, I'm glad that's gotten clarified, but I went through 28 years in the state senate and never quite understood the agency side of it. Because sometimes we'd get stuff and we'd just go nuts. You know, what is this? You know, withdraw these silly things, but we don't want to do that. We don't want to have to withdraw regulations and, you know, whatever. And it was a big fight on whether they were to withdraw them or not. And okay, the agency's withdrawn and now we can get, so we don't have to vote ahead of time to approve. We just send them in draft form, and maybe that's the reason we had so much confusion. They had never been approved originally.
Well, the confusion is what has to be, at what level do we have to approve it to send it through the process?
That's what I'm sort of getting at.
There was never anything that formally said that I've been able to.
There's nothing in the code on this?
That says we have to vote to start the process.
Huh.
So we were starting the process, trying to be efficient on it. We are sort of rewinding because there were some issues to have this vote, just again, full
issue, you know.
Again, and to have full transparency of what we're doing. We're trying to get public input on these things. We're trying to get updated approval from the legislature on something that hasn't been updated in 30 years.
Yeah, I saw
It's
that,
completely out of date.
a little dated,
So,
stuff that was in there. I got glance through.
It's totally outdated. So that's what's going on.
Okay.
So that's the motion that's coming out of legislative committee. As is typical with legislative committee motions, we treat that as both a motion and a second. Further discussion with regard to that motion. Seeing none, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion is approved, and that process will restart again. Next item on the agenda is the update from the Finance and Audit Committee. I'll recognize Commissioner Blackwood and Chris Clark to jointly go over a number of items that have been pending for the past 6 months. Thanks, Chris.
So I'll just say before Chris does lots of the talking about the things indicated here on the agenda, the Finance Audit Committee met on January 9th, and we reviewed several of the items listed on the agenda and voted on several of them, but we need here, I believe, whether to ratify these. So I'm going to let Chris Clark talk specifically about each one and what the next steps are for each one.
Sure you want me to do that?
I'm sure.
Yeah, I've got to balance being repetitive, but also keeping the new members in mind. So if I skip through something too quick and you're like, back up, I need more details, please ask me to do so. The first item, again, we had to keep the ball rolling. There were various things that we had to do during the drought of full commission meetings, and like submitting our budget request, for example. If we want to continue to operate as an agency, we had to get something turned in. So there are a variety of things that we had no choice but to move the ball down the field without full commission approval. Each of these items did go before the committee and were approved by the committee. So what I'm going to do is I'll hit each of these items. I am going to throw out the dates that we discussed these things. I have records of those meetings if needed by the new members. The first item are contract amendments over $200,000. We have a directive. That directive number is 800-03-CP. It is under the commission link on our website. And it's called the Executive Limitations Policy. That particular policy outlines a variety of things that the commission needs to be involved in, one of which is certain procurements over $200,000, as well as contract amendments with our provider network. We have kind of erred on the side of caution in regards to amendments. The wording in the directive states it has to be related to service expansion, but we bring all contract amendments through you unless they're a rate adjustment for cost of living and so forth. So if you look in tab 3, there are 3 sheets of paper. The first one I'd like to go over was the Pickens DSN board. I don't know if it's in the back or in the front. I added it at the last minute because it was an oversight on my part.
Chairman, this came under the $200,000?
Correct.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem. So this particular item was discussed at 11/7 Finance Committee and 11/21 Commission meeting. This amendment is related to service expansion. They opened the Jericho project, which is an SLP program, that generated the vast majority of this amendment. The amendment for fiscal 20 that we're in now is 217 with the annualized $217,035 with the annualized amount of 250,705. And those funding amounts are based on band payments for those underlying individuals and the dates of service. The other item, you'll look at the one that starts in the top left with Charles Lee Center, fiscal 19. This was also at the 11/7 Finance Committee meeting and the 11/21 Commission meeting. We have fiscal agents that process payroll for us for our respite and HASKI attendant programs. I think there's another one they process as well. I always get those confused. But anyways, they're pay agents. And so what we have to do is keep funding them money to keep that program alive. The underlying services are provided to our consumers and our provider network. Those funds are then recouped from our provider network as part of their band funding. It's a money chase. I mean, it's really crazy the way the cash flows go with this thing. But in a nutshell, we have to look at what they're burning, what they're spending at Jasper and Charles Lee, and ensure that we're keeping them in cash and make sure this doesn't come out of their personal budget when they're paying these payroll costs.
Chairman, just one.
Yes, sir.
Could I interrupt and just ask the chair okay, I'm trying to get in my mind where the 200 limitation is floating in here. How does it on the Lee sheet?
They exceed 200,000 per amendment. And so we have other amendments that we process throughout the year, but they're below the $200,000 threshold. So you don't ever see those. So these are only the ones we did that exceeded $200,000.
So do I understand then that the policy I want to make sure that the commission at least sees any decision that was made, even if it's retroactive or a fait accompli. If it's already done, okay, where'd the money go? We see all of that.
We have our budget
Yeah.
that we approved. And then these are the amendments we see the amendments to that that have in excess of $200,000 of impact. So if there's an amendment that only affects $50,000, that's done administratively.
Yeah.
And that's not, we don't.
That's we never did see that kind of money. And I want to see that kind of money. How does that at least come under our purview at some time? 50,000 went here, 75 went there, 100,000 went over there. Where does that show up?
It would be probably a combination of our annual or our budget statements. We show where the money is going. And then at the end of the year, when we're looking at next year's budget, it's sort of like, okay, this is what we budgeted. This is what's going on.
I mean, commission needs to see, but I mean, coincidental with it, not necessarily for approval. It just at least needs to see that we spent 100 here, 175 there, and it's all numbers that are below the 200,000 threshold. But before long, you add those kind of numbers up, you're talking about some real money possibly. That's an old joke that goes back to the millions in Washington, but.
When was 200,000?
It was arbitrary. It was higher than that prior to this.
It was,
Right.
yeah, there was the number, yeah,
Just
but
for that.
at a certain point in time, we didn't see, was it 250? There was a point in time when this was solely related to expenditures by the executive director for procurement issues. And then it was expanded to include budget amendments as basically a control over that, because there was an issue with amendments being done that the commission was not aware of. So to some extent, it was done under a previous executive director to constrain how money was being shifted around, because there was a lot of questions about the transparency of who was getting money when.
Yeah, that's.
And so the $200,000 figure was essentially arrived at as a compromise of amendments of this type, because the problem is you can have just one consumer changing, they choose a different provider. And that can be anywhere, 50,000, 70,000, 80,000, depending on what.
Yeah, what I'm asking.
And so we didn't sort of see those day-to-day shifts. It was just the bigger ones.
Okay, the commission needs to be responsible for at least seeing, that should be transparent, simple transparency. That in my mind, that's not optional. I want to see where every dime is going. And I need to see here the money was, it could simply be a list. If you have any questions about where I spent the money, give me a call. But at least we'll know where the money is going. And so I put that in front of the committee if we needed that as an item, but that seems to me to be kind of like, well, sure. I mean, that's easy, but it needs to be a policy. I think that we adopt. No money at least should be going out that the commission is not ultimately, yep, that was on the list back in November. And I don't know why nobody brought it up, but,
Roughly what's on a monthly basis, what's the number of amendments that we have?
We maintain spreadsheets, that level of data can easily be shared. We have Deborah Leopard, who's not in here, is my contract specialist. She has a rhythm to what she does. She has certain dates that like we true up Band Bs and Band Is, I think 4 times a year. We do residential 4 times a year, but on alternate months. So it's just kind of every month we've got something going on, really. So I couldn't give you a number. Hundreds, probably.
If it's a vacancy, the money has been taken away, and the amendment is a way of giving it back to that provider who wouldn't have funds to actually serve that individual if it wasn't put back. So once you have a spending plan, if we change, because that bed was vacant when the spending plan was given to you, we have to add that money back in. It's
well, then that could be called refund too. Name it whatever you want to. So the list would simply be, how has the money below the 200 been shifted, not for our approval, but for our information? So it would be an information sheet, basically, or something like that. So we know if there's an audit and a question comes up about the expenditure of $17 million that fell under the 200 mark, we would know, and we wouldn't be saying, what? I didn't know that. Well, I want to know everything, and the responsibility needs to stop with each one of us that have been appointed by the governor to at least have the information so we can bring it up and say, hold it, what's going on here? Why is this being spent? So there you go. That's what I'm asking for, and I want to know where the money's going. Every dime where the money is going. If it's just on a list, that's fine. That's my responsibility.
So if I understand correctly, what you're in the form of a motion,
yes, sir,
would be seeking would be quarterly updates of amendments, regardless of the amount.
Yes, not to be approved, but to be seen.
Yeah. Should something like that be sent to the policy committee to be?
I don't think that's
policy.
Yeah, I don't think that's a sort of. I don't know. I wouldn't.
I put it in the form. Chairman, I put it in the form of a motion there.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion of that motion.
I'd like to, can I ask a question? It's not for approval. The money that is going, when you do these amendments, when it has the fiscal agent, it's going to pay a respite center. If you're talking about amendments for a vacancy that somebody have, I personally like the idea of it just being a list versus approval, because you can't not approve it.
I just thought, let me make sure I'm clear on the motion. It is not for approval. That was part of the motion. It was for simply information purposes.
But I would like to say that's always been my heartburn about this. It's like, you can approve it, but you really can't say no, because that provider's providing the service and you've got to pay them.
So does that go for over 200,000?
I think as long as it's not adding to the budget. In other words, we decide that we need a whole new and I think this is where this came from. We need a whole new department, it's gonna cost us $1 million. That's adding to a budget that we already handed you. That I need needs approval. But if we have to pay for services, that's why this has always been controversial, because you can't say no. If Jason Pavner has a vacancy, has 2 vacancies, he finds 2 people to fill it, we've got to pay him the money to do that. And that's an amendment that would be on here.
This would be very helpful to you
I think it
because
would be easier, and for the providers also, I don't think it needs your approval, because truly, you can't say no.
But he's not asking for approval.
Right, I know.
Right, but he's talking about,
time
But-
or
I think
What
what
I'm
Mary's
saying
saying is
is I wanna expand it.
she wants it to be bigger than that. And that, I think, would be something that would need to come
Change the
back
policy.
into the policy.
Right, 'cause
Okay,
that policy-
so I think that's something that we'll probably want to take up.
Because I would rather see a
Commissioner
list of
Malparis
amendments for you, that
to
you
look
see
at.
everything
Okay.
that's
And the
changing.
policy committee, I think that might
Because
be.
it's not adding
because-
to the budget.
And again, there were 2 sides to this, and when this went through, it was very controversial, but there was an element of not, the big things were being done without the commission knowing about it. And that was, the objective was to make sure that we knew about the big stuff.
little stuff can add up to be.
Little stuff can add up, but it's different sorts, different elements, because was it really ever intended to be these sorts of amendments to providers, because the provider are getting
Because they have to get paid.
right, they've got to get paid, versus stuff that we were spending for us, for DDSN. That was sort of, but I think
Is
that's
it new
something.
money, is like she was talking about, is exactly right. Is it more money than what we've approved?
Shifted money or new money or whatever should come, we should at least be able to see it. And then the accountability is for certain. Then you're into a budget year or budget session or something like this. Well, I thought we had enough money there. Oh, don't you remember? All these things that we sent to you, that's how the money had to be shifted and moved or whatever. I would think that from a strategic administrative position would be, board, I gave you commission, I gave you the information, and y'all didn't ask questions about it at the time, and I'm sorry, but there it is. I would think that would be, if I were the administrator, it'd be exactly what I'd want to do.
So we have a motion and a second at this time. Any further discussion with regard to that motion for those quarterly updates? Hearing none, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Chairman.
Hearing none, that motion is approved. And in addition, give the directive to the policy committee to follow up and review exactly what it is that we want to vote on, the stuff that, as opposed to the knowledge side of things to vote on. That being said, the current policy says that we have to vote on these amendments. So we're going to follow that until the policy is amended. So we have done Pickens. Are we done with the Charles Lee Jasper payroll?
As long as y'all are.
Is there any
Y'all
further
have any
questions with
questions?
regard to that? Okay. And the last one,
Is
Babcock
Babcock
Center.
Center. They had, it was a very large agency, it's our largest agency, so they quite often are one of these that you're gonna see, and you'll see them all going forward, but they had 29 new net, so we have to look at the folks that have left the service, the folks that have come in, the net increase, and their Band B population, this is the at-home waiver population, $372,411 for this fiscal year, and 405,826 annualized, and then they lost a net of 6 Band I, which was a reduction. So the net amendment that we did was for 293,895 for this year, and 315,556 is what's projected to be next year's number, should those folks continue receiving services. And that was in the 12/12 commission meeting.
Can I?
committee meeting?
Yeah.
Committee or?
Committee.
We technically did not have commission meetings. We had informational
Right, all
sessions.
these are all informational, yeah, the 12/12 informational.
Informational session. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am? Did you have a question?
I just wanted to just point out, since you're new, when you have these amendments like this, when we read that memo about waiver enrollment, that's how this hits. That somebody is given a waiver slot, we have to add the funds to the agency who's acting as the fiscal agent.
Looking for the slot to be, or else there's no slot
So
there.
every
Yeah.
time somebody fulfills that memo and they get someone through the enrollment process, we've got to add the dollars to where their fiscal home is. So in Columbia, it's a large metropolitan center, and more than likely more people are going through and getting waiver slots here just because of the numbers. Same thing happens in Greenville, same thing happens in Charleston, all those big, areas of population. And that's what this is. So it's not that it's new money into the system, it's funded waiver slots being actually handed out where we now have to send the money so the services can be provided. Okay? It's not new spending.
Right, got it.
With regard to that, those contract amendments, was there a motion from the committee? Commissioner Blackwood?
Yeah, a motion to approve.
Coming out of committee, we'll treat that as a motion and a second. Any further discussion regarding the contract amendments proposed at this point in time? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, those are approved. Next item, the travel directive.
All right, under tab 4, we set a variety of directive/policy matters with our provider network, one of which is travel regulations, which are we interpret what the state level rules are and then develop a policy for our provider network. During the time, blackout period or the period between commission meetings.
Blackout.
At the August 9th Finance Committee meeting and the August 15th Informational Commission meeting, the members at that time took this up and we proposed that we modify this to, the only adjustment was the state went up to $35 per day for meals in the state and $50 outside the state. And we want to go ahead and get this out to our providers so that they can go ahead and implement those changes on their practices. Bring us in line. It was previously $25 per day and $32 out of state.
And for clarification, that's a cap. The
Correct.
providers are free to set that rate anywhere they want up to, including that, but if they wanted to leave it lower rate, they can.
We need a motion?
Will be something coming out of committee. Do we have a motion coming out of committee?
Motion to approve.
Any further discussion with regard to that increase? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that directive is now approved. Next on the agenda is the procurement directive.
All right, under tab 5, this was presented at the same dates, August 9th Finance Committee and August 15th Informational Commission meeting. The state issued in May a revision to the state procurement code. And they increased a variety of procurement levels and changed some requirements related to advertising of sole source and emergency procurements. Again, we didn't know when our commission would be formalized, and we needed to get this out there to help our providers. The procurement function is a very intensive, labor-intensive, and in process, and is a barrier, honestly, to taking care of our consumers. In the past, they had to bid out everything over $2,500. The new limit is $10,000. Now, they could go up to $10,000. Back to the point you made about the meals, these are the maximums. And so the problem that providers have, and I was in the provider world as a finance director and consultant for many, many years, you have a problem getting people to come out and bid on more. It's that small. And, it's really, really hard to find vendors. So we wanted to pass this relief on our provider network. We were throwing a lot of additional requirements on them around this time as well, related to new case management, early intervention processes. So we want to go ahead and get that out. So what we did is we issued them the state's 80-plus page procurement directive and told them that they were free to interpret that themselves and develop policy on their own. And we would hold them harmless if we audited them during that period of time, as long as they had their board approve their policy revision. And so at this point, we have not released our directive. Our directive is here under tab 5. Everything is highlighted that was revised, and we're asking that you approve that this be finalized and issued as DDSN directive at this time.
Is there a motion from the committee?
Motion to approve.
Further discussions or questions with regard to that? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that directive is approved. Next item is the budget plan. Thank you.
All right, under tab 6, you'll find a recap or summary of what was submitted for our budget request for next fiscal year. This was discussed at the September 26th Finance Committee meeting and the 10/17 Informational Commission meeting. We have at this point already held our budget hearings, and we've also with Senate and House folks, and the governor has already turned out his version of what he's recommending. The only item that was not on his governor budget version for this is an item 4, which is related to residential expansion. We are going to continue to request that. Mary might want to speak up here, but our intent is to have that added back to the budget and somewhere in this process, at least in part, as we do have specific populations we need to be able to serve. And these homes were targeted populations. They weren't just general residential development like had been done in the past year.
How many people are affected by this?
Was it 28?
20. And it was very specific populations, as far as like young folks with autism in the teenage years who are very aggressive at home, dual diagnosis of mental health, and talking about criteria around those homes to be very specific as to what you will have to provide to get one of these homes. In other words, proper training for the staff.
Thank you.
And the main point I would like to make for the new commissioners, if you look at item 6 and item 8, these are really not our budget requests per se. It just brings us in line with HHS so that we're both speaking the same language to the House and Senate. So we were requested to add those to our budget request to mirror their budget, right? So,
Yeah, they were going to increase rates on services, allow waivers. So when they do that, that affects our bottom line. And in the past, there was very little communication between the two agencies. So that would happen and DDSN be running down the street after it, trying to catch that bus and increase those rates. But the other thing that was added to this budget was an anticipation of increased utilization of that service based on more availability. Because if you pay a provider more money to do the service, they're likely to provide more of it. So to do that, you have utilization that goes up. So we need to cover that cost too. So that was why it was in the budget. But we actually submitted our budget late after getting an extension because HHS called and said, we're going to raise these rates and you need to get on board with this. And so luckily we were able to do that. Otherwise, as we're discovering now, we're finding some lack of asking for those increases in the past, and we're trying to rectify that currently.
the other point I would make is item 11. Item 11 is a Greenwood Genetics Center. We are merely a pass-through for their budget request, so they represent themselves and ask for these funds on their own. Whatever they can convince the folks at the state level to provide them, we are then given those funds and we pass it through to them dollar for dollar. So that $2 million, that's a year 2 of 5, right, Pat, for a project they're working on. Total cost of $10 million state funds they're asking for over a 5-year period. So this has been submitted. It's looked at favorably at this time. We haven't had any, to my knowledge, any negative feedback from any of the folks that are reviewing this. So we feel really good about where we stand right now with what we've asked for. We need you to ratify what we turned in.
Motion to ratify?
Yes. So we have a motion to ratify the budget request as submitted from the Finance Subcommittee. So we'll treat that as a motion. And a second, further discussion of the ratification of what's already been done. Hearing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that ratification is approved. Next item is the consideration with regard to the state appropriate funds for case management early intervention.
Thank you. Yes, so a little history lesson here. Well, first of all, this was discussed at the November 7th Finance Committee meeting and the January 9th Finance Committee meeting, as well as the November 21st Informational Commission meeting. The issue is that we were legislatively approved to provide a variety of increased rates to our provider network. Basically, the state, based on our request, for example, we have the $1 direct care staff raise, we have the state retirement increase, compression money, health insurance increase, 2% cost of living. All these things are presented to the state. The state then allocates us funds in the state appropriation that we then are supposed to match, get the rates adjusted with Medicaid to then get the full 100% funds, because we only get 30% from the state, to get the full 100% pass through to our provider network. Well, after meeting with HHS over a period of numerous months, 3 or 4 months probably, Mary worked very closely with them to finally negotiate a rate adjustment effective January 1st. So they are going to increase rates January 1. The issue is the legislative requirements where the providers increase their staff's pay July 1st, the first payroll in July. So as a result, there's a gap there between the funds they're going to get from the Medicaid rate increase and the date they were required to pay their employees a 2% increase. The issue that we have to discuss is we're sitting here now with 30% dollars for the July to December period of time. We are unable to draw down the other 70%. So we only have the 30, which is about $200,000. What we got to figure out is how we want to distribute that to our provider network. And there are a variety of things we've discussed at the Finance Committee and have landed on a specific recommendation. What we would like to do, and we feel this is most fair, is to emulate the rate increase that would have occurred July 1st with the dollars we have. In other words, it's a math exercise. You take 220,000 we have divided by the number of units delivered in total, and then per provider distribute those funds out. That would be the most fair and clearest, easiest way that I would feel comfortable with distributing these dollars. The other option is through full-time equivalent data that we have, where everybody has to turn in their staffing patterns. The problem is providers had to adjust their operations based on the new fee-for-service model. Those were turned in March or April of 2019, so they're old. We would have to get all new updated data really to even utilize that, in my opinion. So I really think recalculating what we can afford to bump the rate retroactively based on actual productivity is what I think we need to do and what I would recommend to the commission. At this time, I do not have enough data to give you the actual rate increase. We are still crunching numbers. We're having to work with Health and Human Services to try and get the BabyNet data, which apparently is a heavy lift for them because to distribute early intervention money we have, just utilizing the stats we have for the children 3 to 6, would really result in some bad results, I think, for our provider network.
Chairman, quick question. Now, how much is the difficulty, or we're out of sync with other budgets because of our dates on our budget? Is that part of the sort of the issue that creates a problem at all?
No, the issue is the legislature reviews our budget request.
Right.
They say, yes, we agree. We think this is a great idea. We're going to give you 30% of the funds you're going to need to do this. The other 70, you need to go talk to HHS across the street and get your rate increased. That's the problem we're having.
But we don't have that money in hand because we are allowed the match. Is it because we don't have the match yet?
We have the match.
You have the match.
I'll let Mary speak.
Okay.
She's most.
All right, the problem is we have a kind of a system that has 2 different methodologies of rate setting. One is for early intervention and case management under a market-based rate. DHHS took data, they made a rate, that's the rate they get paid. Now, our other providers are under the band system. So when we get increases for them, we just kind of apply it to the bands. However, when you have a market rate, you don't usually just take 2% from the legislators and plop it into a market rate. The rate is on a formula base. So it was a matter of convincing HHS to unwind the formula, to put the 2% into the salary and redo the formula, and to get them to come up with it. It took quite some time to get them to do that, frankly. And then he would only go back to January 1. So we have from July 1 to December 31st, that rate did not get increased by that, whatever that formula was, that percentage. So we have this money sitting here. Our choices were to send it back. We want to give it to the providers, to the legislature, and they really don't want it back because they allocated it to us. So we want to give it to the providers. The one thing that's completely off the table is we're just going to keep it for ourselves. And we need to find an equitable solution to give it to those providers of those two market-based services. That's the only two we're talking about: EI, early intervention, and case management. Is that?
But I think potentially answering your questions, yeah, the problem is that we got money to pay for our 30%, but the people who were supposed to chip in the remaining percentage refused to do so for the 6-month period.
And why is that? Is
Because
why is that?
They didn't want to give the rate increase. And the entire agency should be on fee for service, but it's not yet. And I pray to someday for it all to be, and therefore we won't have this problem anymore.
This is a problem for good-hearted legislators causing us a problem because our system is in transition, shall we say. I think that's probably the best way to say it. To get to that fee for service and unwinding these bands is very complicated. We had to do early intervention and case management because of past decisions, going back to 2012, 13, and 14. So because of that, we would put on this fee for service in a 15-minute unit for those two entities. I don't know how else to say that.
The part I don't understand is how DHHS can just say, no, we're not going to provide the 70% match that the legislature.
Because they don't have to provide the money. I mean, they don't have to provide, they don't have to increase the rate. In order to get more money, you have to increase the rate, and they didn't want to increase the rate.
The only way they would pull down more money is if they increase the rate. Right. It's not that DHHS has that.
Isn't that what the legislature dictated?
No.
They dictated the 30%.
Well, yeah, that would be, that's federal, and so they would.
70 is federal.
The 70 is federal, so therefore, I don't understand why that's not I agree, why is that not an automatic? Here's our 30, our percent, now, give us the rest, and we decide on, or is the holdup, they at DHHS are.
It's not.
It's problematic for them to do a change. That they don't want to do changes relative to the increase?
They didn't want to change it.
To increase.
All. They wanted the rate to be the rate, because that was what the rate was set as.
Well, or are they arguing, Mary, the increase? That's what I thought they were arguing.
Yeah, they didn't want to give the increase at all.
She battled with them basically as of January 1st. They got it as of January 1st.
It sounds like
as of January 1st. We're talking about a retroactive amount of money.
Right.
So we just need to give the 200,000 that we have. That's what the legislature gave us, correct, Chris? 200,000.
Well, that's the 6 months.
That's the 6 month. That's a retroactive amount. We're talking about retroactive.
Okay.
So
we won't face it again.
No,
right,
because what we said to, what we said to the
Thank
powers to be is if you're going to give an employee raise, don't give it for anything that's market-based. You're going to have to put exception in the proviso.
I don't want to overthink it then. Okay, done, fine.
Hopefully this is a one-time occurrence.
I pray it's a one-time occurrence.
Yeah, but we still have to deal with the fact that this happened.
There's mumbling out there. They may not.
We do have some legislative work to do. There is a proviso out there that our provider network gets state pay raises and so forth. As we move to a fee-for-service model, we're going to have to address that because we don't have a mechanism. We don't dictate those rates. HHS owns those rates.
That's right.
So
and they should.
As we move forward, this is going to continue to be a problem until we address that proviso, in my opinion.
That's a continuing proviso
It usually-
or a new
It's
proviso?
in the general provisos, and what happens is it's not always funded. If you remember back to your time in the Senate, it's not always, it's always funded at zero
This is,
when they start the budget. And then if they want to give a state employee pay raise, they just fill in that line at 2%.
Yeah.
And then they can also give the 2% to what they call county health workers,
Mhm.
which would be our provider now.
And what we're talking about here with these,
Right, and so the problem that happened this year was, as we moved to this fee-for-service model, there was no model to just, we usually, like Mary said, we would just put it in the bands, we would put the 2% in the bands. There is no model to do it for the ones who are on fee-for-service. So that's something that we're just gonna have to either address somehow in that proviso.
well, as long as you got it figured out, I mean, I'm cool
yeah,
with
we
it.
just gotta make sure that legislators continue to understand that if they're going to give a
Who are
state
you,
raise.
you're talking Ways and Means, you're talking about Finance Committee. Well,
It's the finance committee.
the Finance Committee and the Senate and the Ways and Means, and so you got your staff over there on board, and they understand. It's real technical, those staffers understand it. If the, and I'm not talking about the House and the Senate members, I'm talking about the staffers.
Yes.
They understand,
That's who
then
we
they will
talk
say,
to.
da-da-da-da-da, now, Senator, they say, fine, I don't wanna hear this anymore. Okay, and it will be all right, so as long as they understand it, we're cool.
And we keep reminding them.
You are
Okay, fine.
absolutely correct.
I've been through that many times, yeah, okay.
So the issue we're dealing with right now is we were given this chunk of money, 220, that we have to figure out how we're gonna hand it out. 'Cause we're not holding on.
I got it.
So that's what we're voting on today is as best we can, how do we send this money out?
And if they ask us for information as far as FTEs, we would not include the numbers for case management, early intervention right now, because they're in fee-for-service at a market rate. So we wouldn't be drawing down additional monies for them. It would just be.
Don't
for the
confuse me
others.
with the facts at this point. I'm out of here. Okay, I'm cool,
So we're
Chairman.
gonna cover it from our end,
That's
even if
it.
they forget about it on their.
I got it.
All right.
But ask for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do we have a motion from the Finance Committee?
Motion would be to approve, your,
Yeah.
recommendation to.
Increase.
Based on
To distribute the funds.
actual unit productivity.
Actual unit productivity.
Yeah, distribute funds based on-
The blank.
But only the 200,000.
Yes,
We got
sir.
from the
It's
legislature.
221,707 or something.
221,707, only the 227.
I'm doing that from
Add more
memory.
money to it. Okay.
Still in the blank.
That's
her motion, yeah.
Most importantly, Senator, do you have the motion? Okay, so let's clarify that. The motion, as I understand it, out of the committee, is to approve the distribution of those funds that were allocated by the legislature according to the plan based on productivity. Is that an accurate statement?
Based on the
The plan.
actual,
Based on actual productivity.
okay.
Basically per unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna emulate what HHS should have done, but with 30% of the money instead of 100%.
Exactly.
Okay.
Basically, that's simple.
Got that, Sandra?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I do believe Commissioner Malfer said that we would not go over, we would not add additional DDSN funds that we would not.
Right, and we would not go over the 221.
Correct.
Whatever. and
We
change.
would not go over the 221,000 that the legislature gave for any reason.
Correct.
Chairman, I was just gonna say, sometimes when we have technical stuff like this, it's very easy to leave something out and then it creates havoc for the staff. And from experience in the past, from years gone by, what we would do then is simply direct as part of the motion that the amendment be drawn up according to, and let them work out any little fine points, and knowing that they're gonna make it work. I mean, there might be oh my goodness, that wasn't in the motion. Well, I just want to point out that, I trust the staff at this point, given the discussion, to be precise, and they may spot something. We had a little term that we used. I won't try to use our terminology, but it was just understood. The staff can figure this out. Everybody knows what got voted on. We agree, we approve. Now let them write it up. it could be that when a staff comes and wants us to approve a technical thing, they can have it written out that would really, really help our notes and our secretary to get it just right. Or we could simply say, in accordance with discussion.
And I try to clarify, and we also have the recording to go back and look at to sort of.
Well, I just want to make sure that it's amorphous enough so that they can take off and we don't have to have an emergency phone call to get something worked out so people can get paid. We don't need that. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that is approved. Next item on the agenda is the waiver enrollment and Medicaid eligibility to providers.
Okay, there is nothing in the book in regards to this, so I'll just speak to what that involves. We have, as Mary was just talking about, we've moved to a fee-for-service world, and as we move through this process, we have to really work to identify tasks that historically have been performed by case managers that are now non-billable, or things that they need to eliminate administratively as we go through everything we do, regulations and directives, to make them as efficient as possible. What we identified is there's a non-billable activity that case managers have to do in regards to waiver enrollment. And the problem is they're not in the waiver, so they can't bill case management yet. So as a result, HHS, and I guess Mary, you and whoever was with you, developed that rate of $150.50 per case. And what we do, Lori and Ben and some of our staff here run a report, and any case that is moved from a pending enrollment slot to an enrolled slot is then paid to the providers at $150.50 per case. And then we are going to recover that money through an HHS admin contract. It's how we hope to get our funds back. What we've done is gone ahead and paid that out for July through October. Is that right, Lori?
Yes.
Did I miss anything? Did I say
Yeah,
anything wrong?
the only thing that's different is it's really not pending to enrolled, it's pending to no longer pending. So
Okay.
there are some people who,
Decline.
the slot is resolved, but they didn't end in enrollment. They may have
Okay.
declined the slot, they may have been somebody who moved out of state and no longer qualified for the slot, but the $150.50 goes for anybody who was pending and then is no
They get
longer.
over the finish line one way or the other.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that. So we have gone ahead and paid that out. Mary has talked to Josh Baker, and they are to reimburse us for that in a contract. So we're just bringing that to your attention. I don't know that it takes any motion or anything, does it, Mary? I mean,
We just want to let you know we're spending that money, because you can't ask case managers, we're going to pay you fee for service, and you're going to be working in 15-minute units. And we know that it's a slog for them to get to the point where they're profitable again. But we can't ask them to do things that are not billable while we're asking them to work in this fee for service world. So we have to pay them for the things we ask them to do that are not under that umbrella of billable services. So this is one of those items. And we just wanted to let, true disclosure, we let you know where the money's going.
I love
Okay.
it. Great. Thank you.
Anything to get more money to the case management folks.
Yeah.
Well, if they were doing it before.
Right.
And now we want to make sure they get
They get paid for it, right?
continue to do
Yeah,
it.
right. Do we have roughly any idea of
It also behooves people.
how
to get-
many occasions of this? Or-
it was about,
So we did July through October, and we've already calculated November and December, which will be paid. It ends up being right now about $20,000 a month on a statewide basis, right? So, and it varies depending on which provider, how much that provider's getting.
Yeah, I'm just asking for a rough.
Because there's even some of these folks that are getting over the quote, the finish line by central office staff too. It's not just all case managers, we're doing some of it also.
The other thing to recognize is the amount will go down over time because we still have a
Not the
number of
rate,
people.
not the rate.
But the total amount spent statewide will vary based on influx of revenue into the system related to more slots or less slots.
So I don't think we have a motion on that. All right. Next item is review and approval of DOT grant.
okay. For First, I want to thank Deborah Smith personally for taking the lead on applying for DOT vehicle grants that she got here. She has done a great job of securing grant funds for vehicles at PD Center. We have 4 regional centers plus Salibi, and we do run a fleet of vehicles. And PD Center is the only center thus far that has applied for and received our transportation funding for vehicles. We would like to look at that and explore that in our other regions. But I bring before you today a request that you approve. We already have been awarded funding from DOT. That amount is total award of $64,706, which that includes our match. The federal portion of that is $55,000. So for less than $10,000, we can procure a vehicle that's almost $65,000 in cost. And we would like to continue to receive these as awarded, and are asking you to approve our acceptance of the award. We have some additional paperwork to turn in. One document needs to be signed by our chair. Otherwise, we can get this submitted and then we can go about procuring the vehicle.
Is there a motion from the committee with regard to the DOT grant?
So move.
Okay. We have that motion pending to approve the grant. Any further discussion?
I just want to say for the future, as we are getting these grants ready to go, we'll come to the committee, so you don't have to ratify a grant we already have, but that you would approve us applying for it.
Yeah, I don't think these have been brought before you in the past.
But I've always done that in the past in my life. So.
We did that on our county board all the time.
Yeah, we did it on our, yeah. So, okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So no, that grant is ratified.
Thank you. And we'll get with you to get that one document.
I've got it right here.
Do you want to handle the date change?
So, in our last, subcommittee meeting, we mentioned that we would have our next meeting, subcommittee meeting in February on the 6th, but we, needed to change that time to February 5th at 3:30. And then I know going forward, now that we have more members, we're gonna have to kind of discuss a good, time of the month to have these meetings going forward. I think, we were looking at the last week of the month to have these finance and audit subcommittee meetings. And so I just wanted to definitely get the February date on the calendar. And then so for March, maybe we could talk offline about finding the right date for monthly meeting.
Third or fourth, or whatever we decide, right?
Yeah.
Do that another day.
Yeah.
So we will send, for our purposes today, we're just setting the February meeting on the 5th instead of the 6th.
Correct, at 3:30.
All right, thank you for that update.
Right.
All right, next item on the agenda is old business. First recognize Lori Manos for giving us a case management update.
Good morning, thanks for letting me talk to you guys again today about the update related to case management. As you'll recall, case management went from a prospective monthly payment for waiver individuals to retrospective payment on July 1st. So we are entering the first month of the third quarter of retrospective payment to our providers. As a result, we're continuing to provide technical assistance with waiver case management and with the invoicing process, as well as how to correct errors on the invoice. Providers are getting better and better at making errors and correcting errors as we move through this process. One of the other things that we're really trying to do is have more conversations with providers who are consistently below that 60% mark of the previous prospective payment. As you'll recall, for the first 6 months of implementation, DDSN was paying providers 60% prospectively, and then kind of shoring up after the invoicing process to either pay them more if they were over 60% or let them keep that safety net. That safety net stopped for the January payment. They didn't receive a prospective payment. So we're really trying to work with those providers that during that first 6 months kind of got below that 60% to make sure that we do as much as we can to help them get better at billing and increase their revenue. From a program perspective, all those providers have received technical assistance over this implementation. Now the fiscal staff is getting involved, and so the folks from the fiscal side of our house are going to do some technical assistance as well, because in some of the circumstances, even though the amount that they're receiving is below 60% of what they got before, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to get to the point that they were before. You know, there's some ways that people can change up caseloads. You know, if a person doesn't require a lot of contact, they might not be generating a lot of billing. And so it might be that case managers can have additional cases if they don't have as much contact with people. So we're just really trying to do that, continue to evaluate, and then, you know, work with those providers to see if they can make it work. Your revenue analysis for December of 2019, the waiver case management average revenue per individual was $98.33. If you'll recall, in November, we had a drop of about 10%, and I kind of talked to you about the fact that we had holidays in there, and it was consistent with the drop that happened the year before. The good thing that happened in December was we really expected to drop 5% more after November, and instead we increased. So the revenue per consumer in December was actually more than it was in November. So I think providers kind of, stepped up doing more stuff with folks, even though there were holidays in that time frame. As far as providers who have decided to no longer provide case management, we still have 3 providers that have terminated their case management contracts. The last provider that terminated was August the 31st. All of the cases for those 3 providers were successfully transitioned to other case management providers. And while we don't have new terminations, we are still in contact with providers that are just on the fence, right? Especially some of those ones that their revenue is not where they want to be. So, we continue to work with those providers. We have a transition plan in place for what happens if a provider decides they don't want to do case management anymore, how to offer choice of provider. We can assist them with whatever. So I imagine that most of the providers that I've talked to that are kind of on the fence, they're really looking at kind of this first quarter to figure out whether they're going to get where they need to be. Because like January, February, March, we're out of these 2 months where there's a lot of holidays and the amount for consumers is kind of lower than it is the other months.
For those providers that are on the fence, do we have a rough idea about how many consumers are being served by the ones that you would say, and I'm not afraid of that, but a rough number of how many consumers are being served by the ones that are on the fence?
There's one provider that's fairly large. The rest of them, the remainder of them, I would say that one provider doesn't have over a couple of hundred people. There is one provider that has over 1,000. So, it's a good number of folks.
Right.
But we do have a lot of providers that are interested in expansion.
Yeah.
The trick is that a provider can only expand when they have somebody to generate revenue. So, you've got these providers out there who say, I'll be statewide, I'll be glad to take cases from this area or that area. The problem is that in order to meet the need at the time, it's all timing, hiring people. That's one of the reasons that we have this transition plan. So the contracts basically say that providers have to give us at least 60 days notice. And the contract also specifies that at the end of the 60 days, if we don't have the ability to move those people, that they'll keep them until we do, right? So that's kind of where we are.
Well, the other thing is too, if you're a provider, if I'm going to expand and I want to go and I'm going into this county and this county's struggling because they're not producing, so I've got workers in there who are not billing hours properly. I don't know, because that would be my work pool. That's who I would go to immediately. But if they're only producing at 45%, I might not want them as employees. So that's the other thing, because we have a couple of providers who are saying, no, I'm going to hire my own providers in there. So I think that production, again, in those counties is, even if the county doesn't want to do it, it's imperative to the case managers to get their production up so they're actually a likely employee of the next provider to walk in the door.
Precisely.
The other barrier is some of the rural counties that we have, there's not a lot of people. So let's say that in a county, you've got 100 cases and there are 10 providers who are willing to go in that county. Well, if each of them only gets 10, it's not worth it for them to drive to this location. But if one of them gets 50, they'll be glad to go. The problem is you absolutely have to offer choice of provider, and it has to be the consumer and the family's choice about who does their case management. So, there are a lot of barriers out there. The thing that we're really trying to do is just make sure that we keep communication open. We have a monthly case management communication meeting, and we try to really just make sure that we offer as much support as we can to the providers, and that we listen to what they're telling us, and that we try to react when we can.
And one of the really important issues that we're having is that case management cannot be a checkbox system, that case managers are actually part of the quality assurance mechanism of the state system. That's what monitorship actually is, the definition of monitorship. So getting them to start realizing we don't have, yes, we have to have a plan on a certain date. Yes, we have to have these things written down. However, you are now able to bill for your time to ask open-ended questions and see what the families actually need. And please, by all, go into a residential program and pull a plan. Make sure the date is correct. At a minimum, the date's correct, that a behavior support plan is there, and that the date is correct on that. Those are the easy things that they're not, because we shouldn't be finding on an annual review from Alliant that a plan is out of date. That should be, if a case manager's got to go in there at least 4 times a year, and they're allowed to go in more, they should have picked that up on their monitorship view. So we are working with, I don't want to do another checklist, because that just puts them in a checklist mentality. I wanted to develop the training to actually understand what is a functional objective and what is the plan, what should be in that plan when you read it, what should you be looking for when you walk in the door of a residential facility. I think we have stopped doing that for our case managers. I think that also cuts down the incidence of abuse and neglect, because more eyes mean more supervision. And so to do that, you have to have the ability to bill more. Are you incentivized at $139 a month, whether you do or don't? No. But if you are incentivized at 15-minute units, you could be billing more.
Precisely.
So.
Sure.
So I think this is a learning curve for everybody. So it's, who can laugh, who can hang in there to learn it and not be so resistant to learning this stuff.
The other thing is we have providers that are at varying levels of tools that they use. So one of the things we're trying to do is kind of all come together and share everything that we have between providers, so that the state can kind of have a cumulative document that they can use to help them learn for monitoring. So we're really relying on a lot of our really strong providers to help with that as well. There is a little bit of a revenue increase happening in case management, which Chris kind of went over this with you guys in his presentation. The case management and EI rate increases that'll be effective January 1st. I believe it's 22 cents per 15-minute unit in EI and face-to-face waiver case management, and 13 cents a unit in non-face-to-face case management. And so those will be seen on the February invoice for July. I think you had asked at the last meeting that when we talk about things, that we make sure that we remember it's a rate increase related to salary and not really an increase related to productivity. So I'll make sure that we come up with a way to give you that data next month.
January, February's invoice for January.
February's invoice for January. Well,
You said
right.
July.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's February's invoice for
To make sure
January.
it's clear, I don't want y'all to think.
Right. I'm really bad about July and January for some reason. The other thing that happened was the payments that were made to providers for those enrollment activities that are not billable under case management when they're trying to get people enrolled into one of the DVS and waivers. We issued those payments for July through October's, and providers are going to be paid bi-monthly from here on, and those will be a month in arrear, just to make sure that we catch everybody who goes from pending to not pending. Sometimes there's a little lag in stuff getting keyed at the Medicaid agency and then us keying it here, so we want to make sure that, that everybody gets the amount that they actually do. Do you have any questions for me? Okay,
I just wanted to say that I've been watching these meetings for quite some time, and that you seem to be doing quite a good job with this case management situation, and we hope that that others could do it as well for the entire agency at some point in the future.
I really appreciate that, but I cannot take all the credit. There's a lot of people doing a lot of work related to trying to get this done, and, you know, our providers have been very helpful to DDSN as well, you know, just to try to keep communication open and make sure, the big thing is to make sure that people get the services that they need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Related to that, the next item on the agenda is regarding the 60% prospective case management payment. Mary had to step out for just a second, so I think I'm going to sort of talk to a certain extent about that. And you can confirm this for me since Mary's not here. So that 60% payment process, we had approved that for a period of time, and that is now, that period of time has ended.
Correct. It's done.
It's done. And so there is no provision right now for a 60% payment to be going out.
It was, the last time it went out was in November for December, because you approved it for 6 months.
Right.
Which was still after December.
So just to make sure, I don't know, there wouldn't be obviously a motion to terminate because it's self-terminating. It was for a period of time. But there was obviously discussion at that time whether we needed to, whether we needed to continue to have that safety net in place. That's what it was established for. That 60% was established as a safety net during the transition period, while we were trying to actually get actual numbers in of what the revenue was that the providers were generating, to make sure that we didn't have somebody just totally collapse and leave us in lurch and things of that nature. And so now the next item is to follow up with that, to see is there
a reason to continue it?
Right. Is there any?
It's at the commission's pleasure.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's.
I would say we make a motion to stop the safety net program. I think it's past. I mean, it's time done.
I don't know we need a motion to do it. And I think the only motion we would entertain would be one to continue it, because it terminated. We set it up with a termination date.
So.
But I understand, but I mean, if we want to formalize that, we can do it that way as well.
I would rather formalize it that way, that if it ever reenacted, then they would come before the board to do it.
Okay.
If that's not a problem.
No, it's just a question of sort of the purpose of the motion, but yeah, that's fine. So we have a motion to formally terminate that. We have a second with regard to that. Further discussion of that.
Mary has something.
I would just say that if we had to do something again, we would come to the commission and ask permission, that's all. I have no problem.
Staff position on this is that it's appropriate to terminate at this point. I mean, do we need the safety net at this point?
Oh, she just said we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I just.
I mean, I think the purpose of it was to help bridge people, and I think we bridged for 6 months, and people are where they're going to be.
Without just basically increasing their production, that's something they have to do internally.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the motion does seem unnecessary if that's the status quo, that it has ended.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be necessary, but it's nice to be on record. I mean, we need things on record. We need to vote more to get things, so there's no, so there's no ambiguity.
Well, we sunsetted it, we faded it, and that if I needed it to start again, I would never do that without coming before the commission and asking, and bringing a motion to start it again. So
Well, that's fine.
It's, well, we've got a motion, we've got a second. I mean, the motion is here, it exists. And it's there for a purpose. But it may be a little bit formal as opposed to substantive, but it's still, there's still a reason for it.
Right.
understand that, so,
Can I
That-
ask them?
yes.
Robin, you seconded?
No, I think.
Oh,
I did,
okay.
I did.
I couldn't quite tell when I was.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Any other discussion? Okay. All right, then all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Hearing that vote, one abstention, the motion passed. Moving on to new business, a little bit easier. Rob, if you can talk to us about the Silver Palmetto Award for this year, 2019, I guess.
Sir. For over 40 years, the commission has given 2 awards. One at the county level and one to a county government and one to a city government that is particularly helpful to our folks, to one of our local providers. And we get nominations from our local providers for these awards. The first one is the Golden Palmetto. That goes to a county that has done exemplary service for our individuals over the past year. The second one is the Silver Palmetto, and that goes to a city government, a municipal government that has done particularly exemplary work. As you know, city governments have a lot of balls in the air, and they do a lot of things. And incorporating our folks into that is something that we want to recognize. That we see that as a value for this award is to recognize those things. And this year, we give this award out in February at their annual meeting in Columbia here at the Municipal Association. So this will be on February 4th. We'll give this award out on February 4th at the Municipal Association annual meeting. And I want to thank the staff, Rufus Britt and Susan Beck, who served on our committee to screen the nominations and kind of send a recommendation to you this year. Inclusion is the theme that runs through. You're going to have 2 winners here. We've arrived at 2 winners, and inclusion is a theme in this in the award this year. The first one goes to Greenville, and the second one to Rockville. And let me tell you a little bit about Greenville. Greenville is one of those cities that cities around the state kind of look at as a model for how to do their downtown area. Okay, Greenville has turned their downtown area. If you haven't been there, this is like what you probably Senator Thomas can tell us. They have turned their downtown area into a focal point, into a gathering point for the community, and they have included our individuals in that. One of the things that they did, the city of Greenville and the city police department helped to get a drumming up awareness, is what it's called, event in downtown Greenville, where there would be a drum show that was put on in downtown Greenville at the park there in Greenville that was very well received. It was a powerful display of inclusion and musical skill on the part of folks with disabilities during Disabilities Awareness Month. But further than that, Greenville allowed, and I have worked on, having worked on trying to do service projects with governments, it's a lot of work goes into it to get it done, but they have allowed our folks to help fix up a section of the Swamp Rabbit Trail that honors cancer survivors in downtown Greenville. And I just want to highlight that as something important, because that's something that shows that our folks are not something that where the community has to do something for our folks, which is normally the thing. This is something that shows that our folks can do something for the community, and gives them a sense of ownership in the community and a sense of belonging in the community. They've also, in that vein, have served as Greenville Greeters. The Greenville Greeters are community organizations that welcome people as they're coming to work and to special events in downtown Greenville, particularly for the NCAA and SEC women's basketball tournaments this year in Greenville. Also, Greenville awarded the highest honor at the Greenville Christmas Parade to the Thrive Upstate float. They got the Joel Poinsett Award. So for that purpose, for a lot of innovative things that the city of Greenville does for our folks, including them in their downtown area, we felt like that was particularly worthy of honoring. Rock Hill's embracing of inclusion can be described as go big or go home. Rock Hill has put a 7-acre prime real estate area in its downtown area, matched with a lease from Winthrop University, to turn maxabilities of York County's dream of a miracle park into reality. This is an $8 million project. There will be 4 fields, not 1 field, but 4 fields. And the most, I think, the most notable thing about this park is this is a park where typical children will play with our folks, and that everybody will be included and everybody will play together, and it will be a gathering point for everybody, for families and everybody in Rock Hill.
That's an acre.
What's that?
That's an acre inclusive playground that's going to be on there. The inclusive playground.
Yep.
And those are Miracle League Park.
Miracle Fields. And they will also add golfing and fishing features as well. But in and of itself, but beyond that, Rock Hill is betting that inclusion is going to help spur economic growth. And they have included retail space in this plan as well. So Rock Hill is doing something really innovative and really forward-thinking here in including and really bringing the community together. And I think it stands right alongside what Greenville has done as an example for the rest of the state. So for that reason, I would put before you the nomination of Rock Hill and Greenville as co-winners of the Silver Palmetto this year. And I don't know if we can make a motion for that.
Yeah, we will.
I like it. If it's not a conflict of interest, I'm so moved.
Rob, I'd like to add that City of Greenville also hired an ADA specialist in Parks and Rec to come in and evaluate the parks to make them more inclusive. And they had several public hearings to gather input. So they're going to on the top, priority based on that input. So
you hear it all the time at the State House. People are wanting to go to Greenville to find out what Greenville is doing in their downtown area, because it is very.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
Rock Hill has got an incredible Parks and Rec department, and that they're actually the therapeutic Parks and Rec.
yeah.
And they are actually going to run the Miracle League, so you don't have to rely on parents also having to do all this stuff like a little league, so that they can actually go and watch their child. Now, anybody else out there, any counties have Miracle Parks or Miracle Fields? If you do, what they want to do is start doing like the World Series, so you can actually have a travel team, so those children get to have the same opportunities as children that do not have a disability get to go do some little traveling and go play somebody else and get to meet some new people.
Greenville has
Well, you can come up to Rock Hill and
Yeah, I
try
was gonna
out.
say, so I was at the groundbreaking.
It's a rivalry.
Just saying.
I've got to say and the groundbreaking was spectacular. But what was really impressive was when I drove by it a couple weeks ago when they'd done the clearance on it. And how massive the space is. I mean, by the time this part, it is enormous.
15 acres,
Right across the
$8
street
million.
from like the Winthrop Douglas to these prime area of downtown. I mean, it's just this enormous chunk of land that they're working on.
And we would
Oh
be
my
remiss
goodness.
if we didn't recognize Michelle Schaefer. I see her in the back there. She has carried this thing forward, I think, every step of the way here, and is $3.6 million raised from the private community. So that's impressive.
Yeah, a lot of the budget is actually the land that is being given. So it is a good, true public-private partnership. That was a park. It was just, it's Winthrop Park. But it sits in the Winthrop University athletic fields. So you can see their baseball field right from where this park is. And then I think what took so long for the project to get off the ground was Winthrop and having to go through the state system of transferring land, and they basically, it's a land lease for a number of years. So I'm excited about the playground.
So we'd entertain a motion. I think, well.
I made it.
We have a motion.
If it's not a conflict.
No, it's not a conflict.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Chris, can I call you back up for a financial update?
I was done.
Never.
Under tab 9 is our financial update. I will state that we are continuing to work on our reporting format. We really haven't made any progress this month as compared to prior month, other than adding a key to the monthly report you'll be getting that helps you see what type of dollars or expenditures are being incurred in these line items. I have a vision of what I really want this report to be, and it's going to be totally different once we get around to actually be able to implement it. We've just had other priorities with the budget and so forth, and we haven't been able to get to that. But anyways, the budget, if you look at the year-to-date actual expense column, this is basically the most important aspect of this report, really, if you want to go straight down to what you need to look at monthly, is we are half the way through the year and expended 45.72% of our spending plan. And that equates to a 4.28% or $33 million expenditure variance to our good. So we're managing our expenditures very, very well. The problem is we continue an uphill battle with our revenues, and I'm going to get into that here in a minute. I also wanted to answer a question that was asked in the prior meeting related to what's in prevention program. The key here explains what's up under that line item, but as to what's in actual expenses year to date are Think First grants that were awarded, the $12,500. So that's what's been expended year to date that's been charged in that area. Also of interest when you look at this monthly is the carry forward cash flow analysis, sufficient cash line item. Right now we have that at yes, that we do have sufficient cash projected to meet our expenditures, but as we near the end of the year, that check mark can move to at risk or to no. And I will go into our cash projection at this time unless there's questions on our financial update, the budget actual. Cash projection is part of the financial update as well. I just didn't hand anything out to you about that. Any questions on this particular report? Well, any of y'all that have been in business before or have worked with businesses, you know, if you don't have cash in the bank, you can't meet your obligations, you're out of business. That's how businesses go out of business. It's not because they are controlling their expenses. You have to have revenue as well, and you have to manage your assets and so forth properly. Well, Pat Bailey was doing these speeches prior to me getting here at the agency in June. And, you know, he's done a very good job of keeping the commission up to date over the last year or so on our cash struggles and our revenue struggles. And so we knew going into this year, we needed to get a jump on looking at our cash and make sure we start monitoring it as quickly as possible. So we've already begun that process. We are not sharing that information with you at this time because our comfort level isn't where we want that actually issued yet. We will certainly have something for you in February. But I did want to just kind of speak to our cash flow projection, if you don't mind. First of all, I do want to acknowledge Debbie Wilson, who's in the audience, as well as Kelly Anderson, who's not here, I don't think, for all their effort to try and make this work. This is a very, very complicated and involved and intricate process. We have a lot of moving parts. The expenditures piece is the very easy part. Bill comes in, you pay it. That's your expenditure. The issue is on the revenue side. We are subject to a lot of the providers' billing practices and what level of service they're providing out there in the real world, because that is how we generate revenue. So, for example, in January, when we got back from holidays, we had 20-something day program logs that were not signed and submitted timely. Well, that means we couldn't bill December's day services. So now we have to wait in February to get that money. I'm going to be reviewing and trying to get to the bottom of why we have a 30-day billing cycle. I think we need to be able to bill more frequently than that, but this is an IT issue. So right now we drive that data, pull it down, upload it in MMIS, key it and so forth. But we have a 5th working day cutoff currently, 5th working day of every month. And we need to fix that. We need to be able to, especially when our providers go fee for service, they can't wait that long to be paid. So that's an example of how agencies have bed vacancies, or they close their day program for the week at Christmas time, or there's a snow event, or any of these things affect our revenues. It does not affect our expenses because we've already got the money on the street and we're paying those providers for everything. So that's what makes this challenging. So our recent history is that we have been really eating through our cash reserves, and we ended the year last year with about $150,000 in the bank. That's less than the vast majority of our providers that are much smaller than us. We are running a $782 million budget based on fiscal 19. That is 0.02% of our budget. Our daily spend rate is 2.1 million. So our cash would last us 2 hours. If we
Our daily spend rate was 2.1 million?
2.1 million is our daily spend. And that cash that we had at year end would last us 2 hours. So that's a real problem. So we are really putting a lot of effort in how do we fix our cash position.
Thank God we have a new executive director.
The real issue, and Pat, the reason I mentioned Pat is because I watched all these commission meetings on YouTube when I was not with the state, and he would always say, we have a revenue issue. He said that all the time, and he's exactly right. Now that I've got in and started looking at things myself, I couldn't fully appreciate what he was talking about, and it is. It's a revenue issue. So we've got a lot of things we're trying to fix. We have leaks all over the place. Mary's going to talk about one leak in your report, right, that we just identified.
Because you just said it.
With the look back at the eligibility issue.
Yes.
I think you said you were going to mention that.
I am.
So our team is really pulled together. I mean, all of our programmatic folks, our finance team, everybody's all in, and everybody's working on this. Rufus has been critical to help move things from state-funded residential slots into waiver slots where possible. We're really honing in on all of our areas to try and generate additional revenues. We are aggressively managing expenses as well at this time. We're trying to really limit ourselves to what we really need to operate so that we can turn those things back on and ramp those up as we fix our revenue issues. One of the big issues is we have to work with Health and Human Services on a continual basis to address a variety of rate issues that we're dealing with. We have been meeting with them on these, and we continue to meet with them on these. The biggest issues that I can explain to you, for example, when we received the dollar increase for direct care staff, the 2% cost of living increase, the compression money, as well as our South Carolina retirement system 1% increase for our provider network and for ourselves, we have to turn around and get those funds, the 70% from Medicaid. We have only been able to obtain from them increases for ICFIDs, which are a small portion, it's a fairly large portion, but it's not, what, about a fifth, I guess, of our budget, ICFs, something like that. We got that rate adjustment. We were able to also secure rate increases for the dollar DSP increase for our non-ICF programs, but they are giving us pushback on the other portions of those legislatively mandated increases. So we have to go back and meet with them again and convince them that they need to give us this money, and that the legislator intended for us to get the 70% from them. We also have a variety of services that are within our service mix that have been ignored by our staff in the past. Just to give you one example, we have 3 waivers we operate: the IDRD waiver, the CS waiver, and the HASKI waiver. We have, in the HASKI waiver, head and spinal cord injured waiver, we have day services in there that are being paid at $12 less per half day than our other day program rates, but it's the same day programs. So what happened when I asked HHS about that, I went back to 2013 and pulled billing records, and it has not changed. I didn't want to go back any further. I got tired of going back. So I realized from 2013 on, although our costs are doing this and we're paying the providers, we have not gotten a raise ourselves to recoup those funds. So we're losing $12 per half-day unit in our HASKI day program. We're getting $20 per hour for supported employment in HASKI waiver, and it's $81 in our CS waiver. So we've got a variety of problems in our rates. We have also, when we bring in a waiver consumer, we not only bring on all their costs associated with waiver, but also state plan services. So if they go to the hospital, or they go to the doctor, or they get an ambulance to pick them up, whatever, that's our tab. We have to pay that. And so what we have if you look back at the budget request, you'll see an appropriation transfer for first filled slots. That's what that is. It's where the Medicaid is giving us money for our new waiver folks. The problem is they don't give us any money for our HASKI waiver folks. They've never been asked for that. So we've got that hole. Then the amount they do give us has not been looked at in 15 plus years.
It can't be true to us.
Medical rates are going through the roof. And
Not to mention our consumers who were first filled slots 25 years ago are now aging adults, and their medical costs have gone up. And so we're funding more with what we got 20 years ago.
So that's that's not everything. Believe me, I can see a list about 20 other things, but those are the big ones. That's millions and millions of dollars. And so we're fighting those. We're assuming that we're going to be able to convince them to give us some of these funds. In addition to, we have identified, I don't know if y'all know or not, but the agency's really far behind on filing cost reports. The last cost reports were filed in 2012. The 16 cost report was filed prior to me getting here, right prior to me.
I'm sorry, who does the cost report go to?
Health and Human Services.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's a contractual requirement. We have to turn it in 120 days after our year end. We are very, very close to having 17 finished. I've been saying that for a while. The issue we had is when I started delving in, once I became more familiar with what I was even looking at, because it's very, very big compared to the cost reports I'm familiar with and that I filed as a CPA in my profession. But so it was kind of intimidating. And so as I got into it, I realized there were errors in it. And so we had to drop back and punt a variety of times. Then as I got further into it, it was just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. And we talked to the CPA firm, and they actually automated it and put it into a cost report program that automates the process. So that'll accelerate the rest of the filings, and that is completely done at this time, but I've picked up on 2 or 3 additional errors that we're meeting Friday tomorrow to fix, and we should be good to go. Because I've done a pretty good review up to this point. It's just I found some issues with our cost allocation. So with those cost reports, we know that we have at least $20 million in excess residential costs in our system. And we are leaking revenue there. And what Pat has been working really hard with is convincing HHS, and Mary's been involved as well, that we need a rate increase. Our residential rates have atrophied over the years and have not kept up with the times. And so we've got a $21 million leak, if you will. When I ran 2019's numbers, we've lost basically $23 million in our residential programs. So we're asking HHS to give us a rate increase to help plug some of that gap. Where's that money coming from then? It comes out of our state appropriation, which means we can't build a reserve and we don't have any money to do things we need to do. So right now we're projecting to be close to break even. The issue is we've got these funding issues sitting out there, and assuming that they come to the table and say, yes, we need to address these, we should be back in a very positive situation at that point. A 1%, we need, a healthy organization will have 3 months operating. That's what we allow our providers to retain. That's $67 million we would need in our cash at year end. We have 157,000. And 1%, if we can put a 1% profit on the bottom line annually or surplus, that's $8 million. You know, we could start building that up with a 1% margin over a period of 4 or 5 years. Of course, it'd be nice to do more than be able to put more than 1% on the bottom line, but that's a healthy target. So anyway, so I'm sorry to bring all those. Pat, did you want to add anything to what I said?
Great job.
Okay.
You say we're in the black, and stop right there.
So we're going to keep a close eye on this. We'll start reporting this to you monthly, starting in February, as we ratchet down and try to really perfect what we're trying to do with this complex situation.
This time I entertain a motion to approve the financial report as presented.
Approve or receive this information,
We approve the financial report itself.
okay, second or whatever.
Any further discussion with regard to the financial report?
Good job, that was interesting.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Yeah,
Any opposed?
yeah, it's a.
Seeing none of that, the report. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the update. Appreciate the hard work. Next item on the agenda is a consideration of a bid for coastal center roof repairments. And that is Andrew Theron.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Theron. I am the engineering director here at the agency. Here to present the consideration of bids for CPIP project 9921. This is for the replacement of several roofs at Coastal Center that have reached the end of their life cycle. The project budget was about $575,000, which was over the $200,000 threshold that needs commission approval. So on December 10th, 2019, we took bids. The low bidder came in at approximately $533,000, so a little under budget, and that was by Bone Dry Roofing Company out of North Charleston, South Carolina. So just seeking permission to move forward with that project.
Can you explain what a CPIP is?
Yeah, I was just gonna.
Yeah, CPIP is a capital permanent improvement projects. It's all submitted and approved by the capital budget downtown, and that goes for any type of permanent improvement project that's over $100,000. Falls under that classification.
And we put money aside into that.
Yes, it's all already funded. So.
No, so moved.
We have a motion, so we have a second. Any further discussion with regard to that bid?
I'm just praying that their name is accurate.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed?
I just need to know, who's second? I'm sorry, you got,
Commissioner Malcolm,
okay,
second.
good, thank you.
We hope you don't have any leaks in your project. Thank you very much.
All right, next on the agenda is the Haskell Rehabilitation Supports. Susan.
I want to say welcome to new commissioners and welcome back. Continuing commissioners, glad you're here. And I really look forward to working with you again as we move forward with policy committee work. I'll provide an update for you today on some changes underway with the Medicaid state rehabilitation supports services that we provide. There's a brief summary specifically about the actions with that in tab 11. But what I'll share today is some of the updates on we'll start with kind of a broader overview of how we got to where we're going, looking at some contracts and grant reviews. But overall, I'll share some information with you about our efforts to planfully transition each individual through these changes, working with providers who've been very responsible, very receptive, and very creative. And then we feel like some of the outcomes of these changes will result in expanded service access and cost effectiveness, which is also helpful, and the ability to maximize both state funds and Medicaid funds. So for background, in February of 2019, DDSM began a comprehensive review of using contracts to look at cost efficiency and justification for continuation. So in past commission meetings, we presented those changes to you, and those are approved. So there were some shifts because of those reviews. And so one of the areas we reviewed here was our 4 providers providing Haskell drop-in center services and 2 providers providing rehabilitation support services. So we reviewed as part of that process. So among those 6 providers, 4 of these Haskell Community Opportunity Centers have been established across the state to provide services. And then 2 providers that are DSN boards are providing rehabilitation support services. And I'll tell you exactly what that service is. These centers, as we call them, the Community Opportunity Centers, provide services through use of state funds, with the exception of this Medicaid reimbursable rehabilitation support services that I'll talk about today. Within these Haskell drop-in centers, 3 services are typically provided. Drop-in services, where people can visit and receive resources and information. A vocational interest and productivity services called VIP model. And then, again, the rehabilitation supports model. So as we talk about rehabilitation support today, through that update, you should know that about 90 people were receiving those services or continuing to receive those services. And the purpose of the service, when we talk about DDS and services in general, we use a lot of terms, a lot of service names, so I thought it would be helpful to do a little training on that. Rehabilitation services, in this case, serve the purpose to enhance, restore, or strengthen the skills needed to promote and sustain independence and stability within the beneficiary's living, learning, social, and work environment. The service can be delivered in small groups or individually. So in this case, we're serving people with brain injuries who may have had typical lives and then incurred a brain injury. And so the focus for that sort of service is on rehabilitating, so rebuilding the skills that perhaps now have changed because of the injury. So that service is a little different than a lot of other services that we provide. There's no other current Medicaid waiver service or any other current Medicaid state plan service that our folks with brain injury access that are duplicative to that service. So it's posed a little bit of a need for transition as we move forward. So based on a review of those grants, we determined that about 100 people access the drop-in centers, and the cost to the agency were $977,000, nearly $1 million, for those 100 people accessing that service. So, as you would guess from those numbers, this service is being paid at a very high rate, higher than most other DDSM services, certainly those except for residential services. And also in this case, Medicaid pays DDSN as we report activity, and they'll pay us an amount, but then DDSN also pays the providers a higher amount. So we're also having additional costs because of that. An example of that is for an hour of service, our providers receive $45, and DDSN is reimbursed by Medicaid $23.92. So there's a pretty big disparity over time, and we have more detail available if you're interested. Chris Clark has been up here a lot today, so I'm trying to give him a break. But you know, if we were doing some calculations, that alone, that disparity in rates is about $141,000. So that was another analytical point. And then another major issue with rehabilitation support services is that Medicaid controls the parameters of those services, and they've done some narrowing as they've looked at their services. So there's a list of diagnoses that are possible for people who meet medical necessity for this service. So they've tightened that up a little bit, taken out some of those diagnoses. And then they've also included that the service needs to be time limited. It's a rehabilitation service, which is usually time limited. And then they've increased the provider requirements, that the provider would need to have a bachelor's degree. So all of the people receiving those services in the DDSN system do not have those diagnoses. All of the providers do not have qualified staff, and a lot of the people have been receiving the service for an extended period of time. So we have some general conflicts because of those changes. So we've taken a variety of actions and collaborated with providers. Again, I want to thank all of the providers for all their efforts, and of course, Melissa Ritter, who told me not to thank her, who's our director. I know I'll get it later. And then obviously Chris Clark, as well as Mary and Pat and Rufus. Everyone's really worked together to help us analyze this problem, this issue, and then move forward. So in our collaboration, we've reviewed provider costs. We think we can move forward with greater access to services instead of having just services available at these 6 provider entities. We're able to transition people into day activity services as a bridge while we have reviewed what the individuals receiving the services need, and then are going to be working with DHHS to develop a new independent skills building waiver service. So we've been taking a lot of effort to do that. When we analyzed the individuals receiving the service, only 8 of the 90 people had the qualifying diagnosis, and then 1 of the 6 providers met that bachelor's degree qualification for staff. So because of that, DHHS determined that they would provide for us graciously a 6-month transition plan period, which will end February 29th, 2020. So we've been actively working on that transition. And in your handout in tab 11, I've listed the specific transition activities. We're trying to maximize Medicaid funds by moving people into waiver slots if we don't have them. At the time we started, 60 out of the 90 people were already enrolled in the waiver. So we've given 30 of those people of the 90 the slots that they didn't have. 15 of those are already Medicaid eligible. So there's a good likelihood.
That was going to be my question. Do all 90 have to be Medicaid eligible for?
If we want them to receive waiver services, they do. They have to not only be Medicaid eligible, but they had to meet level of care requirements, and we can explain that in greater detail later, but kind of a necessity, a level of disability need.
Right now, what do you project as the ones that would under waiver?
Of that, so 60 of the 90 are already enrolled in the waiver, and then we've got the 30 we've given slots to. We want to try to get them enrolled in the waiver, but potentially 50% of those won't, so maybe 15.
So they wouldn't be able to participate then, or you have to?
Yes, sir. They'd still be able to participate because we're going to bridge that with
Okay,
our
okay.
state.
So all 90 are going to be serviced then?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
super. All right, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Don't
all.
lose anybody. We just want to make it more efficient, so
Yeah,
we're not
I got
double
it.
paying for something.
I got it.
Right.
We're not compliant with.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There are a lot of complexities here. I've tried to hit the high points, and certainly there's a lot more detail, but I know we have limited time.
Why would 50% of them not take advantage of the waiver? Potentially.
So remember, people have had potentially typical lives, and then they've incurred a brain injury. So so sometimes they don't meet Medicaid eligibility because of their assets. In certain cases, I don't think it's very likely at this point, right, Melissa, that people may not meet level of care. They might be able to access the waiver. We're not thinking at this point people would be declining, but
Okay.
that is
I
also.
thought you were
They might
saying.
not be Medicaid eligible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Medicaid eligibility issue.
Are they not Medicaid eligible on the basis of their disability in the same way that?
Not
Okay.
always.
And that income level issue is a real problem, isn't it? I mean, if they, because to do the waiver, you gotta be Medicaid eligible, that's the first step, really.
You have to be Medicaid eligible.
Yeah.
There are certain kinds of Medicaid eligibility where you become eligible after you enroll in the waiver. That's a whole other class.
Because the income level in a waiver, you're allowed to have a higher income level.
Yeah.
So for some people, as long as they become eligible for Medicaid
Okay,
after we actually get them
I was
enrolled in the waiver.
confused then, I thought okay, I kinda had it backwards, all right, thank you.
So, that's what we wanted to brief you, make sure you understood that we're, painstakingly transitioning the service, not only to meet requirements of DHHS, but to be more cost effective as well, and to work with providers to make sure that each individual can transition into services that might not be exactly the same as what they were getting, but will be a bridge until we get a waiver service developed. So we've already kind of laid the groundwork in the past few months with our state DHHS, so they know we want to do this. There'll have to be some calculations and some language exchanged on service definitions, and then DHHS is also coordinating with CMS to make sure they know something's coming and to try to get it done as quickly as possible.
We need a motion?
I don't think we have any motions on
It's
this
just
agenda.
information.
Just information, great. Thank you,
Thank you.
very interesting.
State Director's report.
12.
Chairman, do you know she's sick, poor thing, and she's here working
I
like a
am
dog?
fine.
She does better than to expect any sympathy
I
from me.
know. I'm good.
She
I don't
keep-
get sympathy from anybody. I'm used to it.
She keeps, I know we're on an austerity budget here and everything, but she keeps messing around with that package of stuff, and I keep thinking she's got food she's gonna give
No,
out. No,
it's
see,
cough drops.
I thought it was donuts or something, and I
No,
kept
I'm
looking
just
over there.
wondering, can you overdose on cough drops?
Yes.
Because I've gone through half
Yes,
this.
yes, you can get addicted to them.
God.
It's an opioid issue.
All right, then,
If there's anything that, then that'd be it.
Publishing.
I'm good. I say, because it seems like every time we come to you, we're coming with another issue. We've continued to dig, and, this has been a journey of discovery that has not always been very pleasant. I was hoping I'd come and find maybe a basement that money was there, and there isn't even a basement in here. So unfortunately, I just keep finding holes where money's going out, not where it's coming in. But we continue to dig and find issues from the past that we have to correct. We just absolutely have to correct it. And it has not made us popular with many people. I mean, folks don't want things to change, but we are not sustainable if we do not correct those issues. And that could be going to HHS, because I see Miss Alwine right there, and saying, look, you haven't paid us for 15 years, we need a rate increase. Or saying to the providers, look, this program is not compliant. I'm sorry that there was a pilot program put 20 years ago that no one looked after. But the fact is we don't have people compliant. And we also need to maximize our match. So even if we're only paying for 15 people out of that 90, and we maximize the match, that's good steward of our state appropriation, which is what I'm here to do. I mean, I'm here to serve our individuals and use that money as wisely as possible. And again, some of those decisions are not very popular, but they just have to be done. And we try to mitigate the issues as far as we can go. If it's an access problem, we can go back to HHS and say, look, we can't get case managers in that area. It's got 4 people living in that county. They've already agreed to say in that county, because of access, we could give a higher rate, but it has to be proven that it's an access problem. We haven't gotten there yet. So when we do, that battle will be fought. So Susan's already spoke about our issue with rehab supports, and we're working on it, the transitioning, and trying to be as responsible where people don't lose the support they're used to. Even means we have to write another waiver service to make it work for the people that are in with head and spinal cord injury or traumatic brain injury. We have an issue with recoupment of cited indicators from past provider reviews that have not actually been recouped. It's an issue. We spoke about it one time. I just want to make sure that y'all understand that when we go through these recoupable indicators, some of them, many of them, have no methodology as to how are we going to recoup that money back in the first place. You know, if a recoupable indicator says you have to have a TB test, and we have one person out in the agency that doesn't have a TB, we actually pull that indicator. Do we go back and take back all the money for all the services they've ever provided because one person doesn't have a TB? Some things are just not reasonable, and they don't stand up to common sense. What if it's a case manager agency out there and they're separate from the, you know, that conflict-free thing? We got a case management agency sitting over here, got the residential provider who's got the authorization in their hand. Case manager's plan is out of date, or the LLC isn't signed properly. Do we go back to that residential provider and take back $80,000 worth of services that they've provided in good faith based on an authorization received from an outside entity where they don't get to look at that plan to make sure it was okay? At some point, we're doing the research now that Medicaid says you can recoup if you say I'm going to do a service and you say, ha ha ha, I'm not doing that service. That's a recoupment issue. But or if it's not in the definition of what the service is supposed to be. So if you're not providing residential habilitation, then by all means that gets recouped. But if you have one person leaving a date off of a plan or leaving a signature, forgetting to cross a T, do we take back? So we have to look through these things to make sure that when we do recoup, that we were doing so in a fair manner, that we are actually being fair to our providers in the application of the indicators that we have. And that's what the process is that we're going back through now. We're working with HHS to make sure that someone just didn't get mad at us 10 years ago and slap a recoupable, an R, on half of our indicators, and they have no methodology as to how to take that money back. We can't do that. So that's what we're in the process now. I don't have anything to bring to you today, but my plan is to put into my notes things that will end up on the agenda at some point or another to show this is where we're going, this is what we're looking at, and it might have to end up in a motion here with y'all. Right now, we are investigating, as we are doing with so many things. But I'm going to continue to we're working with HHS, we're working with providers. Tomorrow we have our quality management meeting, which will be passing out these indicators for them to start going through them and saying, hey, this is where the problem is. Or we want their input. I was a provider. I gave my input. I want to listen to the input. And also working with, I've got the executive directors coming in today. We're going to talk about this issue. This is on the agenda. And I'll continue to give you progress notes as to where we are. If it ends up having to be a motion, that will be brought to y'all too. Another error we have discovered is in the number of funded waiver slots. This has been in bone of contention for a long time. When the legislators said we're going to fund 800 slots or 50 slots or whatever the numbers were. When we looked back, and actually we reported that we have 1,026 funded waiver slots. However, recent analysis has determined that this number is in error. We think the starting number is wrong. So we think it's overstated by almost 500 slots. So, which means funding, which means the money's sitting here so that if I've got 500 people that step up to say I want a waiver slot, then we can hand $500 slots out, or 1,000 slots. That's a big difference in funding. Actually, the difference is 520, and the overstatement is $7.5 million. So, given the sensitivity of lowering any funded waiver slots, we don't want to say out here without having all the math done and double checking everything. We're giving the calculations over to our internal audit division for them to basically, I think, what do you call it, Pat? Pressure test the numbers to make sure that we're not making an assumption that's not based on reality. Because we know how it sounds, like which we are just getting rid of 500 slots. That's not what we're doing. Now make sure the math is correct. We have found so many errors over the course of just being here for a year and a half that is not unlikely that the math was done wrong. So we're going back and looking. So
can I ask a question on that?
Yes,
I'm sorry. So are you saying 1,026 slots, you think it's over by 500?
Yes.
Meaning you're funding 500 more than you should be?
No,
or you've got the allocation
we've got
for 500?
we've got them on the books as saying we have funding for 1,026 when we believe we only have funding for 506. Pat, am I saying that right?
Pending.
Just want to double check.
Pending
Pending
People that
slots.
aren't yet enrolled.
They're not enrolled. This is not something that people have in their hand and say, oh my God, if I get this waiver slot, it's not a real slot. That's not the case.
I'm just wondering how we can not know by 500 slots how many slots we have.
Pat?
It was a start.
It came up from a number of ways, and we went back and traced the legislative appropriations, we traced it through our annual expenditures, and so we're pretty confident as what the number should be. Another question is, why is our current number not correct? And if we backtrack that, I think our best evidence is during the wide open waiver enhancement years, that ball got passed off among a number of people, and fiscal maybe wasn't talking to policy, and there were some assumptions made as to, because it was really, I didn't know accounting, and when we started the accounting, we started with the beginning balance that probably included enrollments that we had put out there that weren't funded. And so I think we started with a bad number, but we got to double check all that math. And the consequence is, I think we've looked at the number for years and wondered, why do we have so many slots left? They should be gone by now.
Right.
I think the answer is, they're almost gone, and they will be gone. And we just got to look at that liability to see if it's really our liability. Because, as Chris said, there's reasons why we are where we are, and a lot of it is leakage, and this is just another liability we're trying to address.
And it's really important so that when we go back, if that number was incorrect and we're not actually funded for that many slots, I need to be able to have that verification so I can go to the legislators to say we need additional funding.
Right.
But if I'm starting with a number that's make-believe, and we're sitting there trying to find money, which we didn't have, how do I justify an ask if they're saying you got 1,000 on the books? I think that is extremely important that we verify all of our numbers. And we've been having to do that with just about everything. That's how, Chris discovers we haven't had a raise in HASKI rates in forever. I don't think it was ever raised. So you raised the other day program, why are we raising that one? I mean, that's the problem, is there wasn't any continuity in this. So that is one of the issues we're looking at. And I believe that we have sent out, thinking we've had all these slots funded, we have sent out an additional 300 here or 200 there, and now we're not sure we actually have funding. So basically what we're saying now is that when we get 2 waiver slots to come in, now I want to say this correctly, God knows I'm quoted all the time, kind of want to start rolling back our over allocation of how many we put out there to be pending. I don't want someone thinking they have a slot when they don't. So it's very important that we start, when we get 2 in, instead of saying 1 for 1, when 1 slot comes in, we hand it right back out. We're going to wait for 2 slots to come in, we're going to hand 1 out. So we don't go over our appropriated funding. So just to be cautious while we're working out this number. Did I say that one correctly?
Without a doubt.
Okay. It took too long to answer that.
Right now, we owe 1,026 slots, and that's what we owe until we can prove otherwise.
That's right.
On top of that, what's exacerbated the problem is we've had a history of over allocating above that number.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we over allocate is because 60% of the slots that we hand out get turned down. So we can predict that.
Yeah, then that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We can predict that cushion, but now all of a sudden, if we're foreseeing a drop to 500, we got to get rid of the excess above 1,026 that we've been liberally handing out, not handing out, but trying to maximize it. Sure. What we're trying to do is, one of the issues that Commissioner Thomas brought up was the slow enrollment. We're compensating for the slow enrollment by putting more out there.
Right.
And so we got to address that. But in the short term, for financial prudence, given I think a fairly decent chance that we may prove the case to lower our liability, we got to start bringing in our excess to at least 1,026 that we've committed to. It's only 200 slots. It would take, I think, 2 months to wind that down.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah.
I think I understand.
Well, the
This is
big
tricky.
thing is, if you have a bigger, we have people turn down the waiver, which I never could understand anyway, but they do. And so when they
had
do
the
that.
PDD waiver, they didn't want to get rid of that waiver when that was a waiver.
Right.
They didn't want to get rid of that waiver because it was giving them
Yeah.
ADA versus, and to take a,
But we have not-
IDRD waiver.
We have not seen an increase in that other, so that, it should have increased after that, and it did not. But people want to hold on to what they know sometimes, and if you've got a slot where you've got services that you're fine with, and like in the community long-term care and their support waiver, they want to stay with that. However, that could change, and we can have an increase in the number of people that are taking these slots, and if we're not funded for them, we're going to have a whole world of hurt there.
Well, they would stay in some kind of land of limbo or something until.
And when people say, I want the waiver, they don't want it because they want to live in limbo. They want it because they need a service. And if you can't give it to them because if you've miscounted or whatever, you don't want to make a promise that's false.
Mary, if I were a legislator, understanding the little bit that I'm thinking I'm picking up, would a legislator or a committee chairman or somebody on staff say, wait a minute, you're being funded for those? Why aren't those being filled? Would that be why aren't we overfunding you or something? Has this issue come up as something that is raising questions?
But we haven't asked for additional funding for that, which we will have to at some point. I mean, people keep coming into service. We need more waiver slots, where we wouldn't have a waiting list if we had enough slots for everybody. So I want to be able to go there with a clear conscience and a straight face and say, we need these slots because of X, Y, and Z. If we've got a problem on our books, we need to fix it. And it's not that doesn't happen. That happens. Errors are discovered all the time.
You don't know the accurate number that you have right now.
Well, I think we're zeroing in on it.
It's not an HHS issue.
No, it's our issue.
It's our issue, yeah.
It's our issue. But again, I'm bringing it to your attention. It's not a pleasant subject to talk about, but we've got to verify that that number is correct. Because I don't want people walking around saying DDSN. I mean, we've got people out there using terms, that are actual criminal behavior, saying that DDSN did this with the money. And that might not be the case. It might be the case that they didn't know how to add, which we're finding is an issue. So in other areas, so why wouldn't it be in this too? And we did. It was like the Wild West days. We had slots coming from the legislators like 2 or 3 years in a row, trying to get everybody enrolled. They were throwing slots out left and right because I was at the provider level at that time. So I can see where if you're thinking I'm sending this number out and you're not, and then the other thing is people didn't talk to one another. They were very siloed. Even in finance, they were so siloed. Budget didn't know what finance was doing. And I think that's one of the things that we have, with that being stripped away, that's how we're discovering all these problems, because each area only had a piece of the story versus the entire story. And now when you start putting the entire story together, you're getting a better picture as to what might have gone on and what needs to go on. So it has been very difficult, a little on the painful side. And I don't like to say, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, and I'm not trying to do that, but I'm just saying that now that people are talking together, talking to one another, they are actually figuring these things out, where before they didn't figure it out because they didn't even have the information.
See, and you're bringing it, Chairman, she's bringing it before the board in a very open and transparent way. This is so important because if the legislature or the governor are only getting part of the story, they hear all kinds of misinformation. The board then says, well, they're keeping it from us too, because we never heard, so the fact that you're doing this, I think, is critically important, even though it may be hard to do, it may be hard for the staff. We're not blaming anybody, but for you to be able to come, I think, this impresses me so much, the approach you are taking and staff is taking, and I applaud you for it. And, we're behind you. It's going to work. So keep it up. By the way, how many pages do you have of new surprises?
It's 14 fonts.
I'll go
read it.
I'll go get us some Chick-fil-A if y'all want to. Group and everything. They pay us tons of money here, so I got enough money to cover this.
I do 14 font because, I've got to actually read it. I can't see very well, so everything I do, I blow up.
I'm looking at it over there, Chairman.
All
right, proposed budget update. I want to let you know that we did present the budget you ratified today. Thank you very much. The governor's budget was very favorable to us. We went to the Senate Finance Subcommittee on December 11th and the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on the 15th. We put in a big push for residential expansion. That was the one thing not in the budget from the governor. And I would like you to know that Representative Clyburn from Greenwood said was very concerned about funding for autism, and especially for children. I kept trying to say, sir, that's ABA therapy, and that belongs to HHS. So they might need a little bit of a bump in that rate to attract providers. I think all the presentations went well. The questions were reasonable and very easily answered. I also would like to say that 3 of our central office employees, Lori Manos, Maxine Bradley, and Donna Lloyd, wrote a report from the database to identify consumers that could be billed to Medicaid using a look-back process. We didn't do a lot of this look-back stuff based on eligibility determination. Medicaid eligibility begins at the date of application once it's approved. So they were able to go back and identify those units of service from dates of application through Medicaid eligibility and back bill for all of it. We were losing upwards of $50,000 each month that passed. So they jumped basically on this, reprioritized everything, stopped the hemorrhaging, and we're able to back bill for the services and anticipate recouping. It's 1.2 million in all federal funds, but it's about $850,000 to us.
They need a silver award too or something.
They are getting, I believe in rewards.
I
Really
believe
good
that.
Minor fee.
Well, no, that's a 10% thing. That goes beyond the state, you know. I also want to mention Carol Mitchell from Finance, who was able to provide the billing knowledge to actually be able to get these things back billed. But one of the phrases that we have since banned from this agency is the juice ain't worth the squeeze. I feel like you feel, this is my money, this is everybody in the room's money, taxpayer money, that every dime that we can get, recoup, and do what we need to do, then we need to do the work to get it done. And that was all that stuff just sitting on the floor. In the fall of 2018, we initiated an improvement project to increase DSP staffing levels at the regional centers. Y'all remember the crisis we had? I would like to say that thank you again to Ms. Schaefer and York County for starting the actual class of the DSPs and having, I saw 14 faces, actual people in this class to start working as direct support professionals, which I thought was just extraordinary. The first task that Pat and Rufus and the regional team took on was to look at what 100% staffing level would look like. So have a targeted staffing level at the regional centers. I mean, we were in a crisis situation. So they started, we got Indeed.com in there, just like everybody else in the world's using, and did additional hiring classes and doing some on-site job offerings. So basically you have your interviews there, they're able to go, and then pending, of course, the background checks and everything. But making people commit to, you know, we have somebody there to do this. What are you doing?
I'm sending this to my wife because she will never believe that I'm really here now after lunch instead of at lunch to be back. This is to keep me out of trouble, and I'm going to send it to her right now.
I'll write you a note.
That's what I need everybody to sign, and the secretary, and like she said, you would not stay through lunch for anything. I said, yes, I am. I'm
now
right here.
I know you were
That's how dedicated I'm sending it to her. Send it to her right now.
Got a picture of Mary or a picture of yourself?
I can't tell. You can take a selfie and think that you're being altruistic, you know.
Right.
I didn't get the group.
Okay, I just want to say this, staffing is up. Coastal is up to 97.6% of our total staffing pattern that we want. Witten Center was at 69.5. We've gotten them up to 81.6, which is a huge, huge jump. PD Center's at 100% right now. Midlands is down, so we're now going back to Midlands to start making sure that we do this full court press that we've done on everywhere else.
I imagine we're seeing a huge overtime.
So what we've found is, and it's forced overtime too, so that also has a morale issue involved there. So forced overtime dropped from 6.4% to 5.7%. Scheduled overtime dropped down to 3.7%. Industry standard is about 3.5 for when you're doing a 24-hour care situation.
Overtime can eat you up.
Yep.
Overtime can eat you up.
So we did get, Witten Center at 69.5 is pretty much unsustainable, and we had other plans in place. They're still not where we want them to be, but we're getting very, very close. So I also want to tell you that the cameras, PD says, installation is scheduled for 9/27. Salibi is operational. Witten is installed and training begins next week, and Coastal is operational. So the cameras are basically almost all in. The difference was we had to use different vendors because the layout of all the centers is completely different. It's not the same. You can't just say Coastal, we'll use Coastal's plan at Witten. It's a completely different center. Website, we are working very hard to get, I wanted a pop-up thing so that when you got on our website, it popped up and said, join our mailing list. But apparently we're on the cheap platform versus the expensive platform. We're using
I love your website.
well,
I do.
it
I
can be
think it's
better. I want real people in the pictures. But there will be a form to come up if you want news. We're doing an e-newsletter. We're working on that. So if you want that kind of information, you need to sign up and we're going to put you in there in the database, and that we'll be able to send those things too. So that's one of the things we are working out. And that's basically, I'm just going to stop now. You can have lunch.
All right. Any other business, any other new business we brought?
Sorry.
Hearing none, would entertain a motion. Oh, excuse me, we have to set the next regular meeting will be as scheduled February 20th. At this time, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
I want to stay. And I'm kind
No,
of,
you have to go eat now.
I'm kind of into it now, you know? I'm good for another 4 hours.
Thank y'all. We knew this was going to be a long one. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you. That was.
You did well.
Bye.
You did well.
10 minutes.
I was hoping we'd be out by 1:30.
We need some fun.
It's,
Yeah, we need some.
yeah, it's.